Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Fem Naruto Married Genius of Konoha. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Gazing down at her bandaged hands, Naruko sat at the foot of her bed. Her question to herself was, where did I go wrong? There is no one nearby to inform her. But the fox had disappeared deep inside her head, leaving only her thoughts to keep her company, letting her solve this mess on her own without offering any advice. That day earlier, with a clipboard in her hands, a nurse with cold brown eyes and brown hair glared at the blonde who was sitting quietly in her hospital bed wearing an unattractive hospital gown and said, "You are being released." A little perplexed by this, Naruko glanced up at the woman. Because Tsunade had visited and informed her that she would remain there for a few more days. Knowing something was wrong, Naruko asked, "On whose orders?" The nurse gave her a sly smile. With a smug tone, the nurse said, "The elders and council's orders. They wish to see you in 1 hour." Naruko pushed the blankets off of herself and got out of bed, saying, "I see. Very well." She snarled at the nurse when she first noticed the scar on the girl's back where Sasuke Uchiha had inserted his hand through her heart. "Are you going to leave or are you going to watch me shower and change?" she asked. With a sigh, the nurse turned to go. She shut the door after leaving the papers on the small table by the bed. The fox, lying on a bed of green wild grass, opened his crimson eye from behind his cage and whispered, "Nothing good is going to come from seeing those monkeys. I understand. I am also aware that this will be my final visit to the village. I am also aware that I will need to be prepared to defend myself against that bandage pedo. I'm outside of the village and have taken off my forehead protector for the first time." Pushing herself off the bed, Naruko thought, "You are the prize, and I am his prey to hunt." When she went to the closet, she discovered that her clothes had been changed. With a single tear streaming down her cheek, Naruko thought, "Thank you, Shika." Black shorts with knee-length fishnet leggings, a black tank top with a green camo jacket, black shinobi sandals, fingerless gloves, and a black bra and panties with black bandage tape were all included in an orange backpack. "I am aware that leaving the buck behind will be difficult," Kurama, who had come to like the boy over the years, said, "but we must protect ourselves before we can protect the others from the darkness that will come." Looking at the simple silver band on her hand, Naruko thought, "I know." She clenched her fist slowly. She promised herself, "I will go back to him when the time is right," and entered the tiny bathroom in her hospital room. Clan Estate of Nara. With a hard gaze on her husband and a knot in the pit of her stomach from fear, Yoshino asked, "What do you mean there has been called a council meeting?" Knowing that his son was standing in the hallway listening to his parents, Shikaku turned to face his wife. Knowing that Shikamaru was now concerned about the blonde, he told his wife and son, "All I was told was Naruko woke up this morning and now the elders and civilian council are demanding a meeting and I was just sent notice 15 minutes ago. So I came home to get a few files for the meeting. Seeing anything will help." Yoshino sobbed for her family, trying not to cry. "Those bastards. They have been trying to hurt her for years. Even we have fallen now powerless to help her and with Master Jiraiya out of the village trying to get leads on that little bastard." Out of the corner of her eye, she had noticed her son listening in on them. Shikaku touched his spouse's shoulder. He smiled and said to his wife, "Don't worry. I will do all I am able to as well. I have Choza and Inoichi backing me up." All he had to do was pray to Kami. He was uncertain whether any of the other clans would support him in this endeavor. Yoshino gave a nod. With a fresh fire burning in her eyes, she told her husband, "Then go and give them hell." With a nod, Shikaku left his wife to brace himself for the worst-case scenario in the event that things did not work out. The office of the Hokage. Tsunade sat at her desk and examined a number of the Genin's medical records from the retrieval mission. The odd arrow that protruded from Neji's upper left side of his chest, barely missing the aorta, nearly killed him. It would have gotten it if it had been a few centimeters lower. His actions were careless, but as she was now writing something down on his file, she thought, but it did take his attacker down. Her door was knocked on. Her honey brown eyes harden as she looks up. She yelled, "Come in." A Chunin enters her office. The man bowed to his village leader and gazed up at her with fear in his eyes after taking one of her punches. "Lady Hokage, the elders and civilian council has called for a council meeting." To this, Tsunade raised an eyebrow. She said to the trembling man in front of her, "I see. Tell them I will be there shortly." The Chunin turned and walked away, saying, "Yes, Lady Hokage." He returned quickly to the council chambers. Now that someone is biting her thumbnail, Tsunade raises her left hand to her lips. Thus, they are at last taking action. How will she fare in this situation? She questioned herself as she peered out her office window at the village she had returned to because only one special person could share the flame she needed to survive and defend the people she loved. Opening a hidden drawer in her desk. As she reached for a storage scroll in a different desk drawer, Tsunade arranged a number of scrolls on her desk that she had been gradually sealing since the mission's failure. He owes me. A slug materialized in front of her, and she thought, I'm sure he will take good care of her. She told the little slug, take this letter to Dutch. Tell him I'm calling in my favor. After giving a nod, the slug disappeared along with the letter. The village. Naruko exited the hospital slowly. Her body was still in excruciating pain. But she would be all right in a few hours. She could tell the day was going to be lovely by looking around. Children were playing and running around the village she had saved, and birds were singing their joyful little songs. This is how they pay me back for saving their asses from Gaara. She only asks herself questions. Kurama snarled, they are stupid cattle under the leadership of a fool. I understand, she told Kurama, recalling the day the third was killed by the snake bastard. I wish he were the one to die that day. Kit, I know you. But eventually, Kurama smiled and said, we will have his head. Danzo was now on his short list of people he wished to murder. Additionally, Kit, your name has been removed from the toad summoning contact due to the wolf summons, he informed her. Naruko hummed a little tune that was stuck in her head and simply nodded her head. The toads did, in fact, adore her. Once she left the village, however, she was aware of any ties the village had to her. She would not have a good ending. Kurama had thus managed to get in touch with a ten-tail wolf's old friend and requested his Kit to serve as the wolf clan's summoner. However, will I still be able to talk to Shika? She didn't want to leave him behind, so she asked Naruko questions. But she would have to for the protection of his clan. Yes, brat, before we depart, as well. Kurama remarked, the wolves will give him a summons that will be effective for his clan. In a macabre manner, Kurama and she have been preparing backup plans in case something goes wrong and she needs to leave the village. She would take care of the people she loved. She gazed up at the Hokage Tower as she stood outside it. Her right eye shed a single tear. The two Jonin at the door looked down at her with pity in their eyes as she uttered, I guess it's time. As they entered, they heard some of the civilian council members speak. Because the girl had repeatedly shown herself to this village, they respected her. Following the Chunin exams, Lady Tsunade was located. It stands to reason that the jerks would cease pursuing her. In a whisper, Naruko told the two Jonin guards, it's fine guys. We knew this day would come. The two men simply turned their heads away from the girl and nodded. No one saw how strong she was. Chambers of Council. Pushing open the doors, Tsunade entered. She asks the idiots in front of her, what is the meaning of this meeting being called without anyone asking me first? A woman from the civilian council said, Lady Hokage, we are here to discuss the punishment of one Naruko Uzumaki. To this, Tsunade raised an eyebrow. She asks the stupid woman in front of her, what do you mean her punishment? As she entered the chambers, Naruko said, it's because I allowed that bastard to take their little prince away to be twisted and fucked up the ass by the bastard. Her words caused gasps. She approached the chair that was positioned in the center of the space. Since she was now on trial for something beyond her control, she was aware that it was put there for her. The same woman hissed, watch your mouth. Naruko merely chuckled. She said to the woman, yeah, I don't give a damn. Tsunade and Naruko made eye contact. However, the blonde gave the woman a start. Ba-chan, don't put yourself in danger for me. I am not worth it, she said, her honey brown eyes hardening for the battle she will face after the girl leaves. The Roanapura office in Black Lagoon. In his office, a big black man was examining some papers and a file for a select group of people who would be joining his team. He sighed in an attempt. The man with the blonde hair across from him was informed, Benny, they will not work out for us. Benny frowned and said, I'm sorry Dutch. It's simply hard to find the right people for our new crew. A puff of smoke appeared between the two men at that moment. Dutch raised an eyebrow at the tiny pink slug that was seated in front of him. The little pink slug said, Dutch-sama, Princess Tsunade has a message for you. A puff of smoke materialized in front of Dutch, who nodded. A white scroll was sitting on his desk. Given that Tsunade had been talking to him about the child, Dutch began to wonder if she was now sending him a white scroll. Dutch takes the black rope off the scroll by reaching for it. Dutch, I realize it has been a while since we last spoke, so I'm calling in that I owe you. However, I need you to run with my child. Keep her safe and make her as lethal as you can. The village elders want her dead, and they plan to hide it by making her disappear from the community. I'll instruct Naruko to meet you at the land of Wave Bridge that bears her name. Our final encounter before my return to Konoha. I am aware that taking in a 14-year-old girl and keeping her hidden from the elemental nations is a lot to ask of you. However, dear old friend, I have no one else to turn to but you. Jiraiya taking her into hiding is not something I even trust. Because I have a gut feeling that something is wrong with him as well. Because he is currently out of the village while all of this nonsense is happening. Simply respond to the little slug. Don't put it in writing. A paper trail is not necessary for me. Read this scroll, then burn it. The Yellow Lily. Benny gives Dutch a look. What's up, boss? Benny asked, curious about his boss's current thoughts. We are making a special trip to the EN to get our new crew member. Dutch replied. All he said to the slug before it disappeared was, tell your mistress I'll be there in 12 hours. Chamber of Council. On Tsunade's shoulder, a tiny puff of smoke appeared. The little pink slug whispered, he will be there in 12 hours. As the slug disappeared back into another cloud of smoke, Tsunade simply nodded her head. When the fighting had stopped and Naruko turned to face her grandmother, Tsunade roared, you will not kill her for not bringing back the brat. We will just vanish her. Something in Tsunade's eyes told Naruko that everything would be found. She'll keep her safe. Danzo smirked from beneath his bandaged face and said, fine. As the clan council all scowled and turned their heads away from the girl, Tsunade said, Naruko Uzumaki. Genin of Konoha, as of today you will not be a shinobi of Konoha. As of this moment you are vanished from Konoha and only have 6 hours to gather your things and leave this village. They had failed to keep the girl safe once more. Naruko slowly rose and turned to leave the chambers, saying, all right Hokage-sama. I will head to your office to sign all the needed paperwork and turn in my forehead protector. Shikaku Nara swiftly followed Tsunade to her office after she got up. Sitting in Tsunade's chair, Naruko gazed out the window of the village for which she had sacrificed so much. As the lazy man walked past the busty blonde Hokage to hold the girl while tears streamed down her cheeks, she turned Tsunade and Shikaku. It's funny. I protect this village every second of every day as long as I breathe from the fox. But that is not enough for them. I almost gave my life during the Chunin exams to stop Gaara, then again to bring you back, and now with this failed mission with that little bastard. Shikaku frowned and said, I am terribly sorry Naruko. I have failed you. Naruko raised his gaze to the man. Oh, father, you have greatly benefited me. When we were only 10, they took me in and made poor Shikamaru marry me. She told her father-in-law, but at least now Shikamaru can find a non-distracting woman to settle down and have a boring life. Shikaku smiled sorrowfully and said, he does truly love you. With a sorrowful smile, Naruko said, I know. A brat, I've arranged for you to travel safely. Take those scrolls off my desk. I also want you to cancel your agreement with the Toads. Because right now, I can't trust Jiraiya, Tsunade said, glancing at the girl she considered to be her own child. I have 2 summonses, one for Shika and one for myself. They handled the voiding of my previous one, Naruko remarked. When Tsunade took Naruko's backpack and put all the scrolls inside, she said, good. She also told the girl, there is enough money in there to keep you for a long time. Naruko gave a nod. A friend of mine will pick you up in the land of Wave at the bridge, Shikaku said, stepping back and letting Tsunade give her a hug. There is a picture of him in the scroll, and his name is Dutch. Tsunade whispered, he will take you from here, strengthen you, and protect you. Naruko gave her a nod, gave her a firm embrace, and withdrew. Now, a voice said from her open door, I'll miss you. Well, I'll be away for a while, Shikamaru said with a gentle smile as Naruko looked up to see her standing there. However, I will remain faithful to you alone, Shika. However, if you so desire. She told him, please move on, get married again, and have that dull family you mentioned once. Why would I want to do that? He asks, laughing. One day, I'll come find you. Naruko, I do love you and I'll be faithful to you as well until we can be together once more, he said, pulling her into his arms as he entered her bedroom. Because you're the only one for me. I know, Naruko said, resting her head on his shoulder. Naruko said, I adore you, Shikamaru Nara. With a gentle smile, Shikamaru said, I love you as well Naruko Uzumaki Nara. I had better leave. There is a summons for you, and they will be able to send letters for you to me and me to you, Naruko said. I have a long trip ahead of me. Good, he grinned. As they exchanged their last kiss before their next meeting, he promised her, I'll write you every day. Naruko opened the bedroom window and disappeared into the Nara forest, which had a secret exit from the village. The deer would follow her until they could no longer accompany her. Shikamaru stood at the open window, watching the one person he would ever truly love, even when his parents surprised him with their marriage. He had a crush on the blonde, so he was a little happy about it, but now that his future had been stolen by those bastards on the Elder Council and Civilian Council, he thought to himself, I swear Naruko. One day I will make it all right once more and bring you back to your rightful home. Here by my side and make sure you become Hokage. Even if I have to work in the shadows and do a few things underhanded. I will take those bastards down. He turned to her bed and saw the wedding photo she had been looking at, but he knew it was the one from his bedroom because his was framed in black with a doe on one side and a buck on the side. When his parents saw their son's face standing in the open doorway, they knew they were going to go to war with the council and that they needed to keep a close eye on everything that happened from this point on. Before writing his name on the summoning scroll, Shikamaru smirked and said, So great-grandfather hid his scroll from the family. He looked up and over to his parents and said, I must get stronger. He then left the bedroom and passed them into the hallways that led to the back door. Shikamaru picked up the summoning scroll, opened it, and realized what he needed to do. Alongside Naruko, Danzo is waiting for me at the main gate with his little lap dogs. My clone is going to buy me 2 hours, she thought to herself as she sent a shadow clone to bid farewell to everyone who was significant to her. Naruko swiftly leapt up into the trees after passing safety through the clan's hidden entrance. She exhaled and thought, now to go meet this Dutch guy. She ran to the Land of Waves, a place she hadn't given much thought to since her first C-rank mission out of the village nearly a year ago. I wonder how the old man is doing. I hope no one is making trouble for them. As well I should put flowers on their grave if I have time. She passed several shinobi returning from missions, but they didn't give her a second thought because she seemed to be going on a solo mission. With Dutch, how far away from the Land of Wave are we, Benny? Dutch, his lone crew member at the time, was called out. Benny called out, well the radar and map shows we are about an hour out from there. Dutch said, good. The Land of Waves was not too far away from where they were now, and they had crossed the veil approximately an hour earlier. Knowing that Dutch knew the way from here, Benny got up from his computer and approached his boss. So boss, you haven't told me much about our new crew member, he said to the reserved man manning the ship's controls. The girl is Tsunade's godchild, Dutch said, cocking his head slightly. I left the last time we met because I owed her a favor. I was advised not to do this. For when her calling comes. He informed Benny that something negative was happening behind her. So, how old is the girl? Benny asked, nodding his head. In order to know how to deal with the girl, he asks questions. According to what I read in the scroll, she is 14 years old. Dutch grinned as he saw Benny's shocked expression reflected in the boat cabin's windshield. She is also married, but her husband is staying behind because the wedding was secret from the village and elders of the village. She has a spouse, but she's so young, right? Benny said, still struggling to comprehend it. I'm not sure. When we get to know the girl, we can ask her, Dutch remarked. The Wave Land. Naruko studied Zabuza's enormous blade, wondering if she could lift it. Kurama said, take it, Kit. I'll train you with it, knowing that Zabuza had informed her that the sword belonged to her following their altercation. As she removed the sword from its resting place, Naruko said, all right. She quickly sealed it in a sealing scroll she had brought with her. I'll make you proud of me, Zabuza, she prayed in a low voice. As she turned to face the bridge, she noticed an odd boat parked beneath it. Looks like my ride is here, she said to the graves of the 2 missing ninjas she had become friends with at the very end. She looked down at the path she could take, and it would take her about 20 minutes to walk back down, but if she jumped, she would be there in a matter of minutes. Smirking, she walked back a little and started running, and she jumped down towards the bridge. Black chakra chains screamed out of her back, wrapped around the bridge, and she focused her chakra to her feet before starting to walk down the support beams to the ship, where two men were standing out on the dock. Naruko said, "Hello, Naruko," asked the black man a question. "Yes," Naruko said, "you must be Dutch," as she leapt onto the ship. "Yes, Tsunade wants us to protect you and get you out of here. Making you a member of our crew is the only way we can accomplish that," Dutch said. Naruko told the man, "That's fine. I just hope I can return back here one day. One day, I'm sure we can bring you back here. However, child, we will need to alter your appearance. Where we're going, a blonde with blue eyes will stand out like a sore thumb," Dutch said. "Yes," Naruko said, glancing at her hair. "With the exception of a few other blondes, I was essentially the only blonde in my village. However, no one shared my shade," she informed the man. With a nod, Dutch informed her, "We'll make a stop in Japan to get you a total makeover." "Hello," says Naruko, nodding her head and turning to face the man behind Dutch. She introduced herself to the other blonde on board the ship as Naruko Uzumaki Nara. "Hello, my name is Benny." Benny grinned and said, "Nice to meet you, kiddo. My name may also need to be changed." Naruko froze and stood motionless, saying, "Because I don't think my name is common where we are going, and I don't want no one coming and looking for me." Naruko growled, "That bastard. Kiddo, what's wrong?" Dutch said. "It appears Danzo had a trap set up for my shadow clone," she growls, glaring at her hands. She is upset that this is going to happen and is relieved that she left earlier than she had intended. "Get moving, child." As they returned to the ship and took off, Dutch said, "We can make some plans and come up with a new name for you." However, they failed to notice the red eyes observing from the shadows. Another man with a huge, bandaged sword on his back said, "Looks like we just lost the fox brat." It seems to be, considering what they all said. Naruko Uzumaki has passed away. Itachi looked at his partner Kisame and said, "We will have to inform Pain that Danzo killed the girl and the fox is lost." "That sounds good." As he turned to leave, Kisame remarked, "But the boss man is going to be a little pissed because neither he nor Itachi want to leave the En to go past the veil into the other world." An 8-year-old girl with long blonde hair pulled up in a bun and a white veil fastened to it with a silver fox hair clip that belonged to her mother asked, "Gigi, why am I dressed like this?" However, she was unaware of that. Was wearing a tiny white kimono with an orange obi and tiny orange foxes and lilies on the bottom. As he completed getting her ready for her special day, the elderly man who goes by her nickname, Gigi, grinned down at her. With a sad smile on his face and tears that seemed ready to spill at any moment, he told her, "My dear, please forgive this old fool. But to keep you safe from those who wish to do you harm, you will be getting married today. That is why we are dressing you up like a little doll." The young girl only said, "Oh," to him. She bit her newly painted bottom lip as she looked down. Now that she was starting to feel afraid, she asked him, "Will I love him? Do I know him?" Grinning, he grasped her freshly painted face and gazed into her terrified eyes. "My dear, you will grow to love him, and you do know him as he is one of your only friends from the academy and his mother loves you dearly," he said quietly to her. She realized who he was referring to and stopped freaking out. Since there was only one academy boy who would ever invite her over, his mother would constantly try to snatch her and play dress up with her whenever she was invited. "Shikamaru?" she asks in a more composed tone. "Yes, my dear Naruko," Gigi said as he got up and left his office's private room to go to his desk, where his hat was resting, and where Shikaku Nara and 2 other clan members were waiting for the future mini-clan mother. Shikaku got up and asked, "Hokage-sama, is she ready?" The young clan leader is examined by the elderly Cage. "Yes, but I am sure once we get there the ladies will get after me and steal her away to fix her makeup and kimono." He laughed. Shikaku thought of his wife berating the Hokage for his handiwork in putting on the girl's wedding kimono and makeup, and a smile played at the corner of his mouth. When he and the others heard the young girl enter the room, a lock of her blonde hair fell forward from her long bangs, and he turned around. He said, "I'm sure she will." Shikaku approached the young child and bent down to speak with her. He said to the little girl, "You look very beautiful, my dear." She blushes softly as she looks up at him. Just above a whisper, she said, "Thank you." As Shikaku picked her up, the Hokage said, "Let us leave now." They disappeared in a whirl of leaves, leaving behind only the image of a small child dressed as a tiny bride. Clan Estate of Nara. A young boy standing beneath an altar with 2 pillows in front of him heard a woman hiss, "Stand up straight." Difficult. I'm dressed up, but why? What did my mother say was reoccurring? The boy sighed slightly and asked a question. He straightened up and said, "Troublesome." At that moment, the Hokage, his father, and members of his clan show up. However, his father was holding something small and white. What's dad got? I wonder, he thought. Yoshino hurried to her husband. She pulled the small white bundle from her husband's arms and said, "Let me see her." His mother is glaring at the Hokage while simultaneously glancing at her husband. As she disappeared along with a few of his aunts, she complained, "Can't let a man do a woman's job." He asks himself, I wonder what they did to upset her. His mother reappeared with the small white bundle trailing behind her nearly an hour later, just as the visitor was starting to be tried. However, it seemed that the small bundle was now glowing in some way. It approached him slowly, and he was unable to look away. At that moment, he recognized the person. He stopped. It was Naruto, his friend. Shikamaru remarked to himself, "She is so beautiful." His wide eyes and the slight flush on his cheeks caused Naruto to blush as she looked up at him. Does he truly think I'm attractive? She chuckled softly to herself. Mama Yoshino said he would blush if he thinks I'm pretty when he sees me. A dimly lit room. A woman with long purple hair looked out of her left eye at the digital clock on her nightstand and covered her eyes with her right arm. She let out a forced sigh as her eyes focused on the time the radio turned on and started playing, "Just a Dream." That was flashing, 3 a.m. What's causing me to dream about that day again? As she carefully pushed herself off her bed, she wondered. A vodka bottle breaks on the hardwood floor after rolling off her bed. The most recent of her husband's letters is staring down at her nightstand. Looking out from the open cage doors at the meadow, Kurama said, "It seems like your heart is aching for your buck." My heart misses him every day. But what can I do? That bastard Danzo knows that it was a shadow clone his little pets killed and those assholes that are hunting us. Yeah, right now we are safer here. She informs him. The voice behind her bedroom door said, "Yo, Revi, are you okay?" She sighs as she turns to face the closed door. She yelled, "Yeah, I'm fine, Rock." "All right, but Balalaika is looking for you," said Rock. Revi sighed and called out, "Yeah, tell her I'll be down in a few." She said to herself, "I guess it's time to go to work." Kurama remarked, "Yeah, that Russian woman is interesting." He enjoyed playing with her. Revi simply swung her boot-covered feet off her bed and rolled her eyes. She picked up the brush from her nightstand, brushed it through her hair, and pulled it into a ponytail, telling him, "You would like her." She hadn't done that in a long time. Getting up, she went to her room, grabbed her twin cutlasses, strapped them to her hips, opened the door, and walked up to Dutch's office. When Revi opened the office door, she noticed Dutch frowning because she sensed something wasn't right. As she passed Balalaika and casually sat down on the couch, Revi asked, "So what's so important that you are paying us a visit at 3 a.m.? Balalaika turns to face the lone female member of the Black Lagoon crew. "I was informing Dutch that a strange bounty has come out of the EN that only the underworld knows about." She disclosed this to the perplexed. Revi's brown eyes harden at this, and she arches a brow. She asks the blonde in the room, "Really? What's coming out of the EN?" 2 wanted posters were pushed forward by Dutch. One was a young girl, perhaps 14 years old, with eerie crystal blue eyes and long blonde hair in twin pigtails. However, this girl's 3 whisker marks on each cheek were the most striking feature. Revi gives Dutch a look. Their gazes met. "Shit," she asked herself, "I was wondering how long shit likes this was going to be coming out of there." Benny said, "Looks like the girl is wanted by some old bastard by the name of Danzo, and this wanted poster came out of a village we have never heard of." He was aware of this bastard because Naruto had told him stories about him when she was a child. Revi tilted her head toward Benny. She asked him, "What village?" while glancing at an old picture of herself. Benny said, "Oto, the village hidden in the sound." He was watching Revi to see if she had any stories about this village. In an attempt to downplay it, Revi said, "Odd. I have looked over Dutch's old records of his dealing with the N and never came across that name." Balalaika looks at the girl in front of her. She thought to herself, she is not giving the whole truth about this man. In an attempt to deflect attention from herself, Revi asks, "So who's the other wanted poster?" At this one, Dutch grinned. He shoved the updated wanted poster in her direction. A masked man with only his black eyes visible stood in front of her. But she was too familiar with those black eyes. Shikamaru. Her brain shouted. Her breath caught in her throat just enough to cause her eyes to open slightly. She studied the poster. Wanted Kami Cage, was what he desired from Odo, Kumo, and Kiri. The Ryo bounty is set at 1,500,000. Wow, I wonder what he did to get that name and what he has done. Revi replied. With a sly smile on her face, Balalaika took out a small black book and turned to a page. It appears that this Kami Cage is a Yakuza leader and has taken down several large rings of missing shinobi groups as well as almost killed Danzo, one of the former elders of Konoha who said the traitor Orochimaru in trying to kill the 5th Hokage. As well, he has found and returned the missing Uchiha from Konoha that had ran away to join Orochimaru as well as killed 3 of the new lives that the snake Sannin had taken over. She told them as she closed the small book she was holding. Revi merely chuckled. She said to the woman with the blonde hair in front of her, well, he sounds like fun. She turned to face Dutch, who was all too familiar with her, and said, I wouldn't mind buying him a drink. Rock had repeatedly asked about the girl's past but had been told it was her story to tell, so Benny knew something was wrong with what she had said. Balalaika got up and walked out of the office, saying, well, I figure I'd give you guys a heads up if someone calls you into hunting these 2 down. Revi waved the woman off as she walked away, saying, yeah, sure thing. As Revi and Benny followed their boss out of the office and into his private room, Dutch said, come with me, Revi. You stay here, Rock. The Konoha Tower of Hokage. Sitting in her spacious circular office, a curvaceous blonde woman gazed at the 2 wanted posters on her desk. She gave a long sigh. She opened her bottle of sake and said, these 2 will be the end of me. From the shadows of her office, a dark, silky, lazy voice said, I wouldn't say that. She grinned as she looked up. She said to the man who stepped languidly out of the shadows, I see you have picked up a few new tricks from your summons. With his long black hair pulled up in a high ponytail, the man grinned lazily and said, you could say that, Hokage-sama. His black eyes were full of power, but they were also lazy and slightly playful. He had on a black long-sleeve shirt, a black vest over it, black combat boots, black pants, and black bandages around his ankles, his kunai pouch, and his hands beneath his black fingerless gloves. The Hokage asks, well, Shikamaru, how was your mission in Odo? With a sly smile, he threw a black scroll at her. He approached the chair and sat down, telling her, there are the stolen eyes and the head of the old war hawk. She gave him a sly smile. She showed him the 2 wanted posters and said, well, this is good but also a little too late. When he saw his beloved wife, his eyes narrowed. Well, I guess I shouldn't have waited that extra week. But Ino needed that extra help on her mission with the Uchiha. He let out a growl. Tsunade sighed again and said, well, it is what is it? Never revealing her identity, she asks, anyways, have you heard from her? His lips formed a gentle smirk. He laughed a little and said, yeah. If you stop by tonight, I can give you that little gift she sent you. Tsunade had an issue with that vodka from Russia. How will she react to this Irish whiskey, I wonder? With the same laugh, he pondered. A smile came to Tsunade's face. With a sparkle in her eyes, she remarked, I hope she sent some more of that one for me again. As a knock came from the locked office window, Shikamaru said, she did, and something new. Jiraiya was sitting outside, frowning since he was unable to enter and could not hear what the 2 were discussing. Then Tsunade sighed, I guess our little meeting is over. I will see you tonight. He replied. Shikamaru got to his feet and gave the Hokage a nod. He approached the window slowly, letting the Toad Sannin enter the office, then turned around without saying hello and walked out the door he had previously avoided. Looking at the brat's back, Jiraiya narrowed his eyes. He turned to face Tsunade and took out a red scroll from his coat pocket, saying, no respect, I tell you. Ever since the day I returned and found out that Naruto was banished. He still blames me for not being here for her. With her icy, hard, honey-brown eyes, Tsunade glared at him and growled, could you blame him? When the 2 bratas needed you the most. Where the hell were you? Since the day Naruto was exiled from the village, a lot had changed between them. Jiraiya sighed with defeat. He threw the scroll to Itachi Uchiha and sank into the chair in front of her desk, saying, I was meeting with Itachi Uchiha that day. She raised an eyebrow at him. She asked him, what do you mean you were meeting with Itachi Uchiha? She closed her eyes, balled her right hand into a fist, and looked at the white-haired man who was staring down at his 2 hands on his lap. This better not be one of his stupid games, she thought to herself. Like I said, Itachi is my inside man for the group that is hunting after Naruto. He was informing me that there is a man in the shadows that is controlling the group. The man is claiming to be Madara Uchiha. But the chakra that Itachi feels from the mana, well, it reminds him of his father. Jiraiya raised his eyebrows. He looked down again and added, it's all in the latest report I have received from him. Tsunade picked up the scroll and carefully unfolded it to examine it. To make sure what she was seeing was correct, she read it multiple times. So Itachi believes those of the clan he murdered that night were blood clones, that his father had taken the ones that followed his rule out of the village and began posing as Madara Uchiha to build a criminal origination. She asks the man in front of her. Yes and no. The night he killed his clan he met a man that claimed to be Madara, and this man chakra was powerful. More powerful than anything he had ever felt. He believes this was the man that his father is working with and at one point could have been Madara, for his body was never found at the Valley of the End. But Madara could have passed away now, and he believes his father or others are stepping in as the role of Madara when they are needed, as the others are off doing whatever it is they do. Jiraiya replied. Tsunade put her hands back on her desk and clasped them together, saying, I see. This is not good. If there are any more Uchihas in existence. She glanced at the man seated across from her and thought, this might be more trouble. He appeared defeated ever since that day. He was no longer snooping around the village. Writing, however, is not. However, she deduced that it came from earlier notes that he had not yet utilized. Because his sales had not yet suffered. She asked him, what is it? She was aware that he was troubled by something. Jiraiya asks, barely audible above a whisper, do you know if she is alive? Tears were trickling down his cheeks as he looked up. Who's alive? Tsunade was surprised by his unexpected inquiry. Jiraiya stood up and slammed his hands onto the desk in front of him. Tsunade, don't play games with me. You know who I am talking about. With the way that boy looks at me, I question every day if she is alive. I have even tried summoning her to the Toad Village, but found her name had been removed. Tsunade sighed once more. She told her former teammate across from her, she is alive. Her name was removed for her safety. For at the time, she didn't know she could trust you. Jiraiya collapsed back onto the chair in his ass. Still stunned by this new information, he cried out, she couldn't trust me. Why? I have never done anything to bearing that into question before. A voice behind Jiraiya said, it was the timing of everything. It all happened shortly after you left the village. The Toad Sannin rose, turned, and confronted Shikamaru Nara and his father, Shikaku Nara. Shikamaru gave the man a stern, icy look and said, you couldn't blame myself or my wife. At the time we had extraordinarily little people we could trust. Shikaku Nara, whose usual sloth had vanished and the Jonin commander was standing there, said, my children did the only thing at the time they believed to protect each other. As at the time you had been made into an unknown and will still remain that way until my daughter-in-law says otherwise. Jiraiya sighed in defeat. He sat back down and said, I understand. As he noticed the two posters on the desk, he remarked, one day I hope she will forgive me. Until that day, I will do all in my power to keep all those after her away. Since he hadn't yet seen them, he asked, what the hell? Shikamaru said, don't worry about it. He grinned and said, Danzo is dead. The news will be sweeping the end soon. Shikaku put a hand on his son's shoulder. Someone knocked on the door. Tsunade sighed again as she turned to face the door. She yelled, come in. The door slowly opened, and Kakashi Hatake, his pupil, and the unpopular replacement entered. Tsunade asked, what is it, Hatake? Since the man was currently on her shit list. Kakashi rubbed his right hand behind his head and laughed sheepishly. In the hopes that this information would help him leave the doghouse, he said, well, Hokage-sama, we have just returned from our mission and caught word that Danzo was murdered by the Yakuza head Kami Cage, as well as Orochimaru was spotted heading to the Land of Spring. Tsunade looked at Shikamaru and said, I knew of Danzo's death. But the news of the snake is new. He gave a small shake of his head. While hunting the mummy, he had not even noticed the snake. Tsunade asks the man, was there anything else? Sasuke moved forward. He asks, has there been any word about Naruto? Looking at the jerk behind him, Shikamaru narrowed his eyes. Why would you even care? The last time you saw her, you put your Kami Forsaken fist through her chest. He screamed. Sasuke gave him a snarl. As he prepares to fight the teen in front of him, he asks, I have my own reason for wanting to speak to her. Anyways, why do you even care that I question about the dope? Because she is my wife. Shikamaru growled. The news of Shikamaru and Naruko's marriage had never been heard before. They were aware that the girl's landlord had evicted her, so his parents had taken her in. However, back at the academy, that was the cover story. Asked Kakashi, Sakura, or Sasuke, your wife? As their teammate Sai simply smiled eerily at the teenage boy. Taking a deep breath, Shikamaru said, yes, my wife. Like it is any of your damn business anyways. Sakura, now perplexed, said, but I thought you and Tamari are dating. Shikamaru gave her a fierce look. Keeping the same stern expression in his eyes, he informed her, no. I am not dating Tamari-san. We are just co-workers getting ready for the up-and-coming Chunin exam. Sakura started. Buddha, Ino said. Ino says a lot of things. But she does not know my personal life. The only person to know that I am married is Choji and well Tamari to get her to stop asking me out. Said Shikamaru, looking up to his dad. Shikaku touched his son's left shoulder with his right hand. With a slack smile, he told his son, it's okay. You can tell anyone you want to. You are now strong enough to protect yourself and your wife when she returns. They were even more taken aback by this. His father, the commander of all the Jonin, had just told the academy slacker who had become a Chunin before everyone else and who aspires to stay a Chunin forever that he was strong. Immediately beneath Hokage and Commander Dragon, Shikamaru asked, glancing at Team 7, what? You believed you had our trust to be allowed this information back then? He chuckled. You're all a joke. Back then Sakura, your head was so far up Sasuke's ass you did not care if Naruko lived or died as long as she protected your precious little princess Uchiha for you. You Sasuke, you only cared about yourself and going and killing your brother, and I do not even know if that goal has not even changed as you still behave the same. He said as his eyes moved over to Kakashi. You Kakashi. You should feel embarrassed because you knew who her parents were and did nothing to properly raise her. He looked at the Hokage and said, so no, I don't owe you 3 shit. He didn't care if the elders found out now. Because I long for my wife's return. He turned to leave the office, saying, they will know. He wanted to see his wife and would be taking a week off after Tsunade's visit tonight. Perhaps he should take some time to relax with his missing bride. Now that Shikaku was walking behind his Hokage, everyone's eyes were on Tsunade, who was grinning lazily and laughing. Tsunade complained to herself, it looks like the brat needs a holiday. Shikaku agreed, standing to the right of the Hokage and observing all the idiots staring at him with shell-shocked expressions on their faces. Indeed he does need one. Sakura stepped forward and asked her sensei, is it true, Hokage-sama? What he said here is true, Tsunade said, glaring at the girl. She informed them that they had been married since they were 8 years old. But why? Was Sasuke now inquiring. Uchiha, consider it. Danzo had stated that he had wanted the girl ever since he learned about her, and Naruko is the last of 2 clans. Shikaku Nara's voice grew harsh and strong as he stated, he wanted to use her as a weapon in his breeding stock once she was older. In an attempt to make sense of what he had just learned, Sasuke said, but my clan could have protected her. Like they got themselves killed over their little plan of overthrowing the village. Tsunade scoffed at him. As Sasuke turned his head away from her and crossed his arms, she asked him a question. Exactly what I'm saying. She could only be saved by one person. Most importantly, Shikamaru Nara, her best friend, saved her soul. Because he was the only kid in the entire village who would play with her and show her respect. Tsunade glared and said, unlike the others who would just treat her like shit. No one could even respond to what the Hokage had told them because they all knew it was true, so they all turned away. As he led his team out the door, Kakashi declared, we will be taking our leave now Hokage-sama. Jiraiya got up gradually and said, I have to do something to prove to my goddaughter that she can trust me. He then walked over to the window and leapt out of it. As he offers the Hokage his arm and they both leave the office, Shikaku, who is now observing the setting sun outside the window, says, it looks like dinner will be ready soon and we mustn't be late. Alongside Revi, I'll need to tell Dutch I'm taking a week off, Revi mused as she dropped back onto her bed, still holding the letter she had just received from her husband's summons. So, after all these years, your buck is finally coming to see you. As Kurama gazed up at the lake in front of him, he asked. Yes, this is what the doctor has requested, Revi said, grinning broadly. Kurama grinned and said, he better bring you a nice gift. Well, he killed Danzo and 3 of that snake bastard's new bodies, Revi remarked, grinning more broadly. That's a beginning. But he can do better, Kurama said, grinning more broadly because he realized that his little game was starting to irritate her. Shut up. What do you even know? She told him, crossing her arms over her chest and wearing a furious pout. She could hear the foxes laughing inside of her. A knock on her door prompts Revi to check the time, which shows that it is now 10 a.m. Yeah, she had been storing all of the letters her lover had sent her over the previous few years, and she called out as she placed the letter into a scroll. Would you like to go grab a bite to eat, Revi? I called Rock back. As they left the building, Dutch and Benny stood on the roof with a view of the street below, and she got up and walked over to the door, opening it with a smile on her face and saying, sure, why not? It feels like a storm is brewing and we are going to be powerless to stop it. Dutch's gaze follows the two as they make their way down the street to the inexpensive restaurant that their group frequently frequents. Benny sighed. I understand. He told his friend and boss, I've been feeling that way since Balalaika brought those 2 posters to us earlier. Dutch released a stream of smoke from his mouth and said, Benny, we have to be ready for war. After all the training Revi has been putting me through over the past few years, I know Dutch. I believe I can adopt what she refers to as a Jonin, Benny said, grinning playfully. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, Dutch said, laughing heartily. He patted Benny on the back and said, maybe a genin or a low-ranking chunin. Dutch raised an eyebrow at the sudden puff of smoke in front of him, saying, this isn't good. He looked at the little pink slug that had brought him his troublesome perplet and remarked, looks like Princess needs something. Hello, Dutch-sama. The small pink slug with a scroll appeared in front of her and said, I have a message for you. Dutch picked up the scroll and said, thanks. The small slug nodded its head and disappeared again. Dutch opened the scroll slowly and started to read it. Hello, Dutch. I just wanted to let you know that her husband will be paying you a visit, so you might have some problems here soon, possibly tonight or soon after you receive this scroll. The yellow lily. What did she say, then? Benny asked, glancing at his boss and paling friend. A black wolf with 5 tails and a white stag appear before the 2 men, and a teenage boy with his long, midnight black hair pulled back with an orange hair tie stands between the 2 summoned animals. Dutch said, 2 hands old man is coming to visit shortly. Shikamaru covers his eyes and says, troublesome. He turns to face the 2 men Revi sent him pictures of, the 2 who have been protecting her and preparing her to become a hired hitwoman. Hey, young one. As he recovered from the shock of seeing the boy and the 2 animals, Dutch said, we need to give you a different name while you're here. That's okay, Shikamaru said, nodding his head. He said, just call me Tony. They both nodded as he recalled the Iron Man comic that Revi had sent him. The man was brilliant, so he thought, why not? And realized that he didn't look Asian like that's what they call Asian there. All right, Tony, Dutch said. Revi should return in about an hour after going to get something to eat with Rock. That's all right. Show me her room, please. I must take a shower. He said to the 2 men, I need to take a nap before I see her. I just got back from a mission. Yes, I'll lead you to Revi's chamber. Simply keep an eye out for any traps. Benny laughed and said, Rock learned the hard way. Knowing where the girl's room was, the wolf disappeared down the steps, saying, don't worry cub, I'll smell them out and take care of them. Following Benny to Revi's room, Shikamaru nodded his head. Daisy Kappa copyright. A tiny smirk appeared on Revi's lips as she tensed up as she sensed Chakra nearby. Would you be interested in going on a date at some point, Revi? Rock thought it wouldn't hurt to ask, so he did. When Revi heard his question, she turned to face him and blinked her eyes. No, she said, hearing a big ass laugh his furry tail off at her. Rock, I've already told you once. Additionally, you are not my type. She shocked him by saying, I am already spoken for. Spoken for? Rock asked, now perplexed. Yes. Expressed. Revi grinned broadly and said, he should be here soon to see me. Oh, Rock said, displaying a hint of disappointment. I apologize, Rock, but ever since we were young, he has captured my heart. With a distant gaze in her eyes, she told him, Revi said. Hey Revi, may I ask you a question? Rock was asked. What is that? Revi knew what the question might be, so she asked. Where are you from? Asked Rock because he was curious. She gave him a smile and said, I'm from New York. I met Dutch and Benny while traveling a little after growing up on the streets, she informed him. Rock said. Oh, since he knew she wouldn't say anything more, he decided to stop talking. Revy shouted, "Hey Daisy, add another to-go order to our order." A woman with brown hair pulled back in an untidy bun and blue eyes emerged from behind the counter carrying a ticket and 3 to-go boxes. "Yeah," Dutch called. "Benny has been eating like a girl in the know," she remarked, grinning. Revy growled, "Hey, at least I keep you in business, you old bat." "I'm only 26 years old, brat." Daisy growled, "The same age as you." With a shit-eating grin, Revy smirked and said, "I'm 16. Rock and Daisy both went pale as they turned to face the girl sitting in front of them. "You're lying," Daisy said. After finishing her meal and slapping the cash on the table, Revy said, "You wish." She then took orders and fled the diner, with Rock chasing after her. "You're so young. I believed you to be around 19, said Rock. Revy grinned broadly as she glanced over her shoulder at him. "Nope," she informed him, "I'm old enough to drive, drink, and kill." As they both hurried back to the office, Rock merely stared at her and said, Revy 16 in America is only old enough to drive." As she leapt over a car to cross the street, ran up the stairs to Dutch's office, dropped off the meal, and returned to her room with the extra one, Revy said, "Well, in my books I am." After watching her eat the extra food, Rock walked slowly and breathlessly up the stairs to the office to start working. When he opened the door, he saw Dutch and Benny eating and paperwork waiting for him on the corner of the desk. What was the purpose of that? Rock was asked. After exchanging glances, Benny swallowed his meal and said, "Revy has a guest she hasn't seen in years." He then resumed his meal. "Oh, a relative or a friend?" As he wondered, I asked Rock. Dutch grinned and said, "You'll meet him once Revy is ready to come out of her room with him." Rock paled as he realized what Dutch was getting at. "You could say family." With a dejected sigh, Rock said, "Her mystery boyfriend," and went to work. Since they didn't need Rock to freak out over Revy's marriage, the two men remained silent. The room of Revy. With a smirk on her face, Revy set the food on the dresser, slipped off her boots, and slipped to the slightly open bathroom door after opening her bedroom door and hearing the shower running. A deep, smooth voice from the shower said, "You still make too much noise." As she entered the bathroom and took a seat on the counter beside the sink, Revy pouted and said, "Well, I just wanted to surprise you." "It's always a surprise to have you as my wife," he said, smirking lazily as he peered out from behind the shower curtain. "In addition to the fact that you still love me after all this time," he informed her. Leaping off the counter, she went to the shower and approached him, standing on her tiptoes and slowly putting her arms around his neck. "I am just happy you still love me after all the trouble I have caused you," she said, leaning in for a long kiss. He grinned as he pulled her into the shower with him, and she gave a little shriek as she broke the kiss and giggled at him. He hugged her while they stood in the shower, her clothes getting soaked. Shikamaru grinned and said, "You might want to take those off before you get sick." Her crystal blue eyes met his black ones as she gazed up at him, her cheeks blushing slightly as the transformation she had been using faded and half of her blonde hair was dyed purple. Shikamaru leaned down and kissed her again, saying, "I've missed our nights talking together and falling asleep in each other's arms." As they broke their kiss, she whispered into Naruko's neck, "I've missed you as well." Their eyes stay together until Naruko's eyes flutter close. Naruko steps back and takes off her tank top, revealing that she is not wearing a bra, and her unbuttoned shorts, leaving her only in her black boy short panties. She blushes as she looks up at him. "I'm not going to ask you to do something you're not ready to do," blushes Shikamaru. He hands her the washcloth and a bar of soap she used in the shower and says, "So, how about you wash my back for me?" As she starts to wash his back for him, she nods her head slowly. At one point, she presses her body against his, kissing his back and putting her arms around his chest. "Where did you get that scar?" she asked him. He glances over his left shoulder, blushing a little as he feels her breast against his back. He told her, "I got that one from Tamari." Naruko tilts her head to the side and asks, "Gaara's sister?" She questioned him, "Why would she give you a scar?" Shikamaru felt a vibration against his back and said, "Because I told her no and that I was taken." Naruko burst out laughing. As her arms grew weaker around his chest, Naruko asked, "She attacked you for turning her down for a date?" Turning that against her, after spinning around and pinning her to the shower wall, he leaned his head into her neck, bit it gently, and kissed her shoulder and neck. Shikamaru traced the scar with kisses and asked, "Yeah. But how did you get those scars on your shoulder?" Naruko blushed and pressed herself against him, saying, "Crazy Chinese bitch that wanted my head." Shikamaru, who was already familiar with the tale, grinned and said, "I see what you did to piss her off." Naruko slapped him across the chest and said, "You already know your ass." He laughs, picks her up, shuts off the shower, returns her to her bed, and places her on it while he grabs a towel to pat dry. Glancing over his shoulder, he sees her blushing, averting her gaze, and reaching for the towel that was lying by her alarm clock. He takes out a scroll and opens it, revealing a pair of boxers and pajama bottoms. He puts them on and lies down beside her while she takes a loose-fitting tank top from her dresser's top drawer and puts it on while he gets dressed and returns to him with the food. Her words to him are, "Here, eat something, and I know you need some rest." Shikamaru took the box from her and started eating the eggs, bacon, and pancakes, saying, "Thanks." He said to her, "You know I skipped out on dinner." "Yeah, I know that you wanted to get here quickly, and you would skip dinner and mom will kill you once you're home," Naruko replied. After finishing his meal and throwing it in the trash in the corner, Shikamaru said, "Yeah, but it's worth it." He then crawled onto her in bed. He gives her a kiss and says, "You are worth it." Rock had arrived outside Revi's room to deliver some packages, but he could hear the two conversing. Benny was standing on the top step when he turned to leave after setting the boxes down on the floor. As he descended the stairs, he put a hand on Rock's left shoulder and said, "Sorry man. I told you not to fall for her." He went to his room to rest after working on the software for Balalaika all night and said, "There are other girls out there. But I know Revi is a rare one." Rock turned to go back to the office to complete his work and perhaps grab a few drinks, saying, "That's fine. Perhaps you can talk to that nun at the bar." When he returned to the office and saw Dutch dozing off on the couch, he wondered. The room of Revi. As they lay pressed together, Naruko looked up at Shikamaru, who was flushed. There was a hunger in his black eyes that she had never seen before as they gazed down at her crystal blue eyes. She was the only one who could satisfy his hunger, and she could see it reflected in her own eyes. Shikamaru asked, "Are you sure about this?" Was he prepared to leap off her and stand in a chilly shower? She nodded slowly, unsure of her ability to speak, but she knew she had to say something. She blushed even more as she told him, "Yeah, I'm sure about this. We are both now 16 years old, the legal age for Nun Clan shinobi to get married." Out of the corner of her eye, she thought she saw steam rising off of her. A sluggish grin appeared on his face. Leaning in close to her neck, he inhaled her scent of ramen, forest, and now, strangely, gunpowder. "I didn't bring any condoms with me and I'm not sure you know the jutsu to stop yourself from getting pregnant." Naruko giggled as she heard the demon inside her growl with laughter at the boy's shocked expression. "Kurama will take care of that part for now. But he said after this, you need to go buy a box and don't bitch about not liking how it feels." He blushed now and said, "Troublesome. Thanks, and I'm sure we can find something we both can agree on." When they were younger, they used to pet each other sparingly. She did not, however, permit Shikamaru to slide his hand beneath her shorts, letting him feel her breast only. She gasped at his touch as he slowly started sucking and kissing her neck. Her skin felt like it was on fire from his lips and fingers. He leaned down again to bite her neck tenderly, and she could feel his smirk on her neck. She let out a breathless moan. He slowly rolled his hips against hers, and she slowly started rolling hers against his. He sensed that their taunting was making him harder. He only hoped that he wouldn't blow up the moment he stepped inside her. The thought crossed his mind, difficult hormones. Naruko felt herself getting wet for him, and she could feel a fire heat up between her legs. As she put her legs around his hips and lower back, she thought to herself, "I just hope I can enjoy it and make it enjoyable for him for at least a little while." Their brief foreplay is gradually becoming more intense. Shikamaru cupped her double C breast with his right hand as he slowly moved it up her side and up under her loose tank top. Naruko groaned softly as he touched her. He played with her hardened bud with his rough hands on her soft breast. He smirks as he approaches and presses his lips to hers again. They kiss for what seems like an eternity before parting ways because they both have a burning sensation in their chests. Naruko looked down into his eyes, her hunger growing as he wanted her even more. "Shika, I can't take any more. I'm going to pop," she whinnied. The Konoha. Rookie 12 without Shikamaru and Naruko. 10 rookies gathered under a tree in the park to catch up with one another. Ino was eating a bag of chips when Choji and Ino approached. Sakura and Sasuke sat under a tree with their strange new teammate Sai, while Neji and his teammates Tenten and Rock Lee trailed behind. With Shino, Kiba, and Akamaru following, Hinata had rushed up. In between pants, Hinata said, "Sorry we are late." Sakura waved her away, saying, "It's fine." She informed the Hyuga heiress that everyone just arrived. Tenten asked, "Where's Shikamaru?" as she turned to face Ino and Choji. Choji merely grinned. He informed them, he is on vacation and went to go see his wife. Sakura leapt to her feet and hurried towards Choji. She asked, but also demanded, "You have known this whole time that Shikamaru was married to Naruto." This also made Ino's larger teammate the target of her teal eyes. She was unaware of this, so why wasn't she informed as well? Choji gulped down his nod chips. "I have known since we were 9 years old. About a year after they got married. I found out by accident. I went over to his house to see if he wanted to play and found them out back cuddling under a tree watching the clouds go by. Well, Naruto was sleeping but Shikamaru was watching her out of the corner of his eye. He told everyone." Ino pouted at her teammate and said, "Wow. For being part of the family and your teammate. I was left in the dark. That kind of hurts." Choji took another chip out of his bag and bit into it, saying, "I'm sorry Ino. It wasn't my place to tell you." As Sasuke squinted at the untamed boy, Kiba asked, "So Shikamaru has been married to a babe like Naruto for 8 years. He looked up at the sky and said, "I did ask her out once after we became genin and she just laughed and said no." "Well, you got lucky. I'm fairly sure Shikamaru would have kicked your ass." Ino replied. After giving it some thought, she remarked, "For he was acting different before she was banished from the village." Sasuke merely scowled. The thought of the dope marrying the lazy bastard from their class did not sit well with him. Didn't like that he hadn't been selected to marry her in order to shield her from whatever was going on behind closed doors. Why was the Nara required? He was interested in the answer to that. Sakura sighed in defeat. "I just can't believe that Naruto and Shikamaru had kept this from us for so long." Neji glared at the Pinkett and said, "Well, what the elders told everyone about her. After she was banished from the village. I don't blame them. She has been living with a curse placed on her when she was just an hour old. Could you blame her for not opening up about that burden as well as telling us all that Shikamaru and herself had to get married to keep her safe?" He continued. Kiba asked, a little perplexed, "Why did you say that last part?" As the others stared at her in disbelief, Hinata said, "What Neji Nisan is saying is that Naruto was in danger, for the burden placed within her. Many who craved power and knew of her secret that was to be kept from the rest of us. They would do anything to use it and control her. So that is why their marriage was kept from the entire village. Because as it stood at the time, the Nara clan was the strongest out of all the clans to take her in and protect her. The notion that the Naras were more powerful than his own clan at the time simply infuriated Sasuke. As if those slothful idiots had any authority. What did I ever see in him? He almost killed my friend and then he tried killing Shikamaru when he brought the bastard back from that pedo," Ino said, narrowing her eyes at her childhood crush. "That Nara clan might appear to be weak. However, they are not close to it. However, they simply keep it a secret from everyone else." Knowing that would enrage him, she asks, "Why do you think the Nara has been Jonin commander since the village was formed? Why not a Uchiha?" demonstrating to him the lack of gratitude in his clan. Sasuke's only response was, "HN." Neji grinned and said, "As I thought. Anyways, it would have been pointless to bring her into the Hyuga clan as I was the only male close to her age to marry her off to, and I am part of the branch family and we have no power." As if Hinata was born a male. Then that would have been a whole different story, he said as the other people nodded in agreement. Kiba sheepishly rubbed his right hand behind his head and said, "Yeah. I don't really think my clan could have handled Naruto." They all nodded their heads as he said, "They already have their hands full with myself and trying to find my sister a husband for the future. Her chakra would have been deadly to my insects if she was brought into my clan." Shino said, and the others understood what he meant. "I am a clanless boy and I wouldn't have been able to do anything for her. But I would fight tooth and nail to protect my comrade and friend." Lee said this with a rage in his eyes. Tenten sighed as he looked at the others and said, "We know Lee. We were all powerless to do anything to help a friend in need back then. The only one that could do something for her was and will always be Shikamaru," she stated to the others. As they turned to face him, Choji said, "I wouldn't worry too much about them. They will be alright. They always are. As for now, We will see Shikamaru back in a week from his vacation. If he doesn't try to stay for longer. He replied with a grin on his face. Now, Hinata blushes along with Tenten, Ino, and Sakura, and the guys blush a little too because of the bigger boy's remark. I guess I'll find out if I'm an auntie when he returns. Ino grinned. Ino, Sakura exclaimed. She told the group's lone blonde, don't say anything like that. They are still too young to be having children as well. Naruko is still on the run from whoever is after her now. Ino merely chuckled. Ino turned to the others and said, it will be found. I know I was just joking. Just take a chill pill, Sakura. She looked at the others with seriousness and said, I also saw the wanted posters for Naruko today. It is worrying me, as well for that Yakuza kamikaze. Sakura grinned and said, I wouldn't worry too much about the one on Naruko. For Danzo is dead. According to Hinata, who had a distant expression in her eyes, that doesn't really matter, Sakura. Once it comes out of the village, she is the last Uzumaki. Kumo or Kiri or even Iwa will want her. They would turn her into breeding stock. She turned to face the Pinkett and remarked, as well she holds the strongest of all the mightiest of bijus within her. That just paints a larger target on her back. Neji simply glared at the girl who glared back at him. That is something you never had to fear, for there isn't anything special about you, Haruno. But us who have bloodlines, we have to live in fear of being kidnapped and turned into breeding stock for other nations. Neji did, however, make a point. Sakura lacked any ancestry or qualities that would make a village want her. Yes, she was a great medic and very strong. However, that was the extent of her abilities. Apart from that, she remained the worthless little academy fangirl who was still pursuing the last Uchiha who didn't want to interact with her. Everyone knew that one thing, but they kept it to themselves because they knew it would break the girl. They also knew that Naruko would not want them to treat the girl cruelly. As their students discussed the two missing rookies, the Jonin sensei stood in the trees and listened. Kurenai turned to face Kakashi and Asuma and remarked, I never knew Naruko was married at such a young age. Guy lost his youthful bluster and said, we didn't either. It is a shocking truth about what happens in the shadows of the clans and in the village to keep one safe. I knew my father was up to something that say when I saw him with a tiny white kimono, but I didn't question him as I thought it was for a doll that he was going to give Naruko or my sister. Asuma let out a tentative sigh. I was a stupid and blind fool. I should have done more for my sensei's daughter back then and once she became my student. But I was being blackmailed by the elders and civilian council, said Kakashi as he rested his head on his. They turned to face him. Looking at the silver-haired Jonin, Kurenai asked, what do you mean? At the time Naruko and Team 7 became Genin, Danzo found out I have a daughter and wife hidden in the Land of Fire's capital. At the time, my daughter was just a year old and my wife. She was still too weak to fight off root agents or anyone else. So I did what I had to. I placed my family first over my two female students and trained the Uchiha mostly, said Kakashi with an exhausted expression. Guy asks, what of your family? Kakashi gave him a look. They are now hiding in the Land of Spring. As Naruko found out about my wife and daughter and saw the threatening letter I had from Danzo, she pulled a few strings and had my family moved without anyone ever finding out and later told me. He explained as tears fell from his open eye. I am scum and she still helped me. She could have just turned a blind eye to my worries and allowed my family to die. But she didn't, and now they live in the palace of the ruler of the Land of Spring and my daughter is getting private training from a retired shinobi that Naruko knows. He spoke in a lighter voice. A voice behind them said, the girl is truly great, isn't she? Jiraiya and Shikaku were standing there. Shikaku grinned as he said, my daughter always puts the needs of others before her own. Kakashi merely gave a head nod. Kurenai asks, will she ever return? With rage in his voice, Jiraiya said, I'm not sure for now. It is best that she is wherever that is. For she is being hunted like an animal for the tail beast that is held within her. He also questioned whether the idiots who should have been killed that night when Danzo gave Itachi the order to kill his clan were still alive. He advised them that it would be best for her to avoid this area. At that moment, every rookie showed up in front of the senseis. You guys talk too loud, Tenten remarked, grinning as she observed all of the startled Jonins. Neji looked at each of them and said, we heard everything. The others nodded their heads, and he added, we want to do everything we can to help our friend. You mean Itachi was given the order to murder my clan? Sasuke was demanded. You are aware of what Lady Hokage informed you. Your clan intended to turn on the village and murder everyone until they achieved their goals. However, those idiots were unaware that Shushi and Itachi had previously run for Hokage. Jiraiya growled at the little bastard in front of him. They also planned to kidnap Naruto and set the Nine Tails loose on the village, killing all those innocent people without caring whether they could control the beast or not. Itachi informed me that his father had given him the order to murder your sorry ass in order to obtain the last stage of your damned eyes. However, the boy was unable to do it at the time. His adorable younger brother looked up to him as if he were his hero, and he could not bring himself to kill him. The Hokage wanted to resolve this through amicable negotiations and any other means he could think of, so the only thing he could do was inform him of what his clan was planning. However, the vengeful war hawk saw this as an opportunity to accomplish two goals at once. Even if they lost the Uchiha clan, the village would still be strong if he had Naruto. Power would not be a source of pain for them. But if they suddenly lost both the girl and the clan, then, since we were still at war with those two hidden villages at the time, Iwa or Kumo would have attacked us. Shikaku Nara glared at the boy. How are you aware of all of this? Asked Sasuke, who was feeling unsteady and nauseous. A few days prior to the Hokage's demise, he informed me when he called me into his office. He needed to discuss his past transgressions with someone. He was helpless to stop the sins. Shikaku said, I am aware of this because of sins that have destroyed or cost many lives. He also gave me his journals detailing everything that happened that evening, including the fact that Itachi is now a spy. To protect the little girl he would watch over while he was in Anbu, and to protect the village that has taken so much from him. After the villagers attempted to attack her or refused to sell her food, he was able to cuddle with the young girl. He viewed the young girl as his younger sister, for whom he could do nothing more. However, he had always ensured that she had access to food, clean clothes, and other necessities. Even after the villagers broke into her next house and set fire to her first small one. He would constantly plead with me to keep her at my house at night because of this. She would never be turned away by me. My wife has always been delighted to have Naruto at her house because she adores her. The night Itachi brought Naruto to us following the girl's attack, she was devastated. That evening, I informed the Hokage that she would wed my son and receive clan protection. Indeed, villagers attempted to enter my house and harm her. However, another was on the horizon. They were facing the wrath of the Nara clan. The Ino and Choji clans followed our example, and many of them lost business. You had seen people leaving the village and a number of establishments closing, hadn't you? They all nodded slowly in response to his question. We are more powerful than most people realize. Additionally, we produce all of the drugs for this village's pharmacy and hospital. The majority of the land deeds and almost every farm and ranch in the area are owned by Choji's clan. Since all the actions pertaining to silk factories and other factories are controlled by Ino's clans. Without us, they had to depart and shut down because they were unable to get their goods. Not even the civilian council could force us to comply with their demands. As a result, these three clans now operate more stores in this village. Both the Hyugas and Kiba's wild mother were having a good time, and Hisashi never hated the girl. He was also a part of our little scheme to run a lot of those bastards, as the Hyugas own a lot of the banks and deeds to a lot of stories in the village. Shino's dad also came along. Shikaku smirked at them all and said, before he found Benfield to aid where he could, he was tried of how his and other clans had been tried in the village. With shock in her voice, Sakura said, so that is why Daddy couldn't buy the silks for Mom's shops from the Land of Fire no more. Her mouth fell open. My dad never had an issue with Naruko and always sold her weapons she would need and all her gear and even tried selling her outfits without too much orange. Tenten replied with a grin on her face. All the rookies were shocked by this small revolution, but Sasuke was more affected than most because he had always believed that the other clans were weak and helpless, but now he realized that they actually owned and controlled Konoha, and he felt helpless in the face of them all. The bedroom of Revi. As Shikamaru slept from their mid-morning and afternoon activities, Naruko rested her head on his chest and listened to his breathing. There was a knock on the door, and Rock's voice said, Revi, you go a call. Yeah, I'll be out in a minute. She called back as she slowly sat up, sighed, put her head back in place, and grabbed a loose shirt, shorts, and underwear from her dresser. As he headed back to the office, Rock said, okay. She was talking to someone when Shikamaru woke up, so he called out to her, hey. Hey, she said as she slowly turned to face him after finishing her outfit. I suppose I have to answer this call. She said, you can go back to sleep. Nah, I'm kind of hungry now, Shikamaru said with a yawn. He said, why don't you wait? I'll get something on, and when you're finished, we can get something to eat. Her head nodded, and she said, sounds good. Come on, Shikamaru said, getting up and hastily putting on his boots while Revi put on hers. Remember to call me Revi. Okay, Tony, she smirked as she questioned him. The now named Tony said, yeah, I know Revi. Tony trailed behind Revi as she opened the door to her room, went up the stairs, and entered the office. He sat behind his desk, arching an eyebrow at Revi's disheveled hair and attire, and turned to face the man sitting next to her, whose hair wasn't any better but he was attempting to calm it down and pull it into a ponytail. Who was calling me, then? Revi yawned in response to the question. Dutch smirked as he said, your buddy at the rip-off church. What is Ida's desire? As she approached and picked up the phone, Revi snarled, yeah Ida, what do you want? She informed the blonde on the other end of the phone, I'm kind of on vacation for the week. The voice on the other end of the phone said, hey Revi, I was just calling to make sure it wasn't you dressing up as a maid and raising hell in town. What on earth are you discussing? Asked Revi to be less irritated and more confused. Well, a woman dressed as a maid and matching your disruption is scurrying around town in search of a child. She eliminated a fool from a smaller gang, Ida remarked. All right, Ida. Revi's gaze shifted to Shikamaru, who had finally fixed his hair and was now repairing his boots. I can tell you I have been in bed all day today, she said. Indeed, a romantic date. Ask Ida if she wants the dirt. Revi smiled and said to the other woman, yeah, something like that. What? Ida was screaming when Revi pulled the phone, and the words, you never gave anyone the time of day, could be heard. Now, what has changed? She insisted. Revi smirked darkly but playfully as she said, you'll find out tonight when we all meet up for drinks. Tony sat back, grinning and shaking his head, saying, troublesome. Revi told the other woman, sticking her tongue out at him, well, I'll see you in 2 hours and you can tell me more about this maid look-alike. All right, see you then, Revi, Ida said, hanging up. So, two hands, what's happening? Asked Dutch. Benny and Rock were now in the office, so Revi turned to face him. Ida called to tell me I have a twin running around town dressed as a maid looking for someone, he said. But when we visit the bar in 2 hours, she will provide me with more information. She should, in my opinion, also obtain more information. Yawning and running a hand through her hair, she said, but for now I'm hungry. She walked over to the office door and said, time for dinner. The others just gaped at her, for this could bring more trouble to the church as well as us. Revi, why don't you go get ready? While Tony spends some time with us, Dutch remarked, glancing at the man with raven hair who was seated on his couch. Well, all right, Revi said, yawning once more before leaving the office and returning to her room to change for the evening and take a shower. Let me guess, Tony says, turning to face Dutch and Benny, who is now seated on the corner of Dutch's desk. You'll let me know if I've hurt her. As Rock looked on, he asked the two men, I am dead. Yes, essentially. However, she has informed us. Benny grinned and said, you have been looking after her since she was a young child. With his eyes fixed on the man in front of him, Dutch said, Two Hands is part of our family and we don't want to see anything happen to her. I would never do anything to harm her because she is my wife. Tony glared at both men and said, I killed the bastard that placed the bounty on her, and I brought back the bastard that tried to kill her before she was part of Black Lagoon. So I would move heaven and hell for that woman. You and Revi are married. Astonished Rock asks a question. As if it were no great secret, Tony turned to face the lackey of Black Lagoon and said, yeah, we have been for the past 8 years. But Revi is only 16. How is that possible? Questioned Rock. Where we came from prior to moving to New York. As he realized he had made a small mistake, Tony said, it is acceptable to get married as children. I detest those third world nations, sighed Rock. He missed the glances that Dutch and Benny exchanged, but at least you managed to get her out of there safely. Shikamaru sank back on the couch and thought, thank Kami, he is a fool and it was true what Naruto told me. There are places here that allow you to marry as children. An additional item, little two-handed people running around my office is not what I want. So make sure you wrap it up, Dutch said, grinning shit-eatingly as he watched Rock blush and the boy turn bright red. That man is as bad as Anko, Tony said, letting out another sigh. Troublesome. After a while, Revi returned to the office wearing a black tank top, shorts that exposed her black boy shorts and socks, combat boots, and her guns on her shoulder holsters as she was afraid Tony might set one off and her hair pulled back into a ponytail. "All right, boys. Did everyone play well?" As she glanced at them all, Revi asked, her eyebrows going up as Rock blushed before turning away. "All right. What transpired during my shower?" asked Revi, who glances at Dutch before turning back to Tony. Pointing to Tony, Benny grinned and said, "Big mouth there, let it slip you're married." As if it were no big deal, Revi's mouth opened into a big O. Well, it was bound to come out anyways. She grinned broadly. "I just can't wait for the shitstorm from back home when they find out." "Well, when it told your former team, they appeared to have had a heart attack." However, Tony said, "It came out more in anger." "Well, what they think is irrelevant. Before I left, they never showed enough interest in getting to know me." Revi sat down on top of Tony and said, "Now that they know my secret, why should I even care what they think of me?" "Well, the car has already been pulled around by Benny. Let's go now." As well as two hands. "This time, don't drive." Dutch glared at the perplet and said, "I love my classic." Revi simply pouted at him. "Well, it's not my fault no one has taken the time to teach me how to drive." "Well, aside from knowing how to operate a boat, plane, and helicopter," she said, beaming broadly. "How about we find a tank and let you have a field day with that?" suggested Benny. Dutch slapped the man with the blonde hair across the head and said, "No." With a wider smile, Revi said, "But I'm sure if I call Balalaika, she could get me one." "Oh no, how on earth did you win back the affection of the Russian mob?" asked Dutch. "I'm not sure. Simply put, I'm a likable person," Revi grinned. "Come on, troublesome woman," Tony said, putting an arm around his wife's shoulder and shaking his head at her antics. He smirked and said, "Let's go eat and then talk about you destroying the world." Revi smiled and said to Tony, "Hey, I could take the tank home and territories those bastards." After giving her a brief glance, Tony turned to Dutch and remarked, "That might work." The bigger man sighed and shook his head, saying, "I don't think they are ready for two hands over there yet." Don't worry, Master Garcia. I'll save you," she thought to herself as she sat in the dark in the far corner, watching everyone who came and went. She was trying to identify the men who had taken her young master and killed his father. Dutch smirks at her as they exit the car, and Revi pouts. "I'm not going to allow you to call Balalaika for a tank," he says, as she prods him with her tongue. He pulls her into his arms and presses his chest against her back, saying, "It's nice to see you haven't changed much." Tony merely chuckles, remembering how she used to do this with his father when he wouldn't let her work on her own special soldier pills that she had been working on for some time. As they entered the bar, Revi gave him a fierce look and crossed her arms over her chest over his arms, telling him to shut up. A woman with blonde hair, wearing a nun's outfit and sporting sunglasses, sat at the bar with a small glass in her hand. As she and Tony approached the bar, Revi said, "Hey Ida." When Ida hears two hands calling her name from behind her, she turns and says, "Hey Revi." Her eyes widened as she saw the taller man standing behind Revi, his arms encircling her waist. "Who's the guy?" As she started to gather herself, she asked. Tony grinned at the nun with blonde hair who was seated in front of them and said, "I'm Tony." "Tony?" Ida asked, glancing into Revi's deep brown eyes. "Yes, Tony, he is my spouse," Revi remarked, grinning as she let the words sink in. As her drink slipped between her fingers and landed on her ass, Ida's eyes widened. "Your husband, you're only about 21, she asks. With a laugh, Revi leans in to whisper in Ida's ear, "I'm only 16 and don't yell it out." "You're only 16, Ida looked up at the perplet with wide eyes and whispered softly. With a smile, Tony said, "Yeah, we're brothers the same age." 3 other men were standing behind them, laughing, while a woman dressed as a maid observed the nun conversing with 2 individuals off in the dark corner. "Get our drinks, Revi." Dutch turned around and walked to an empty table in a corner where they could keep an eye on who entered and shield their backs from onlookers. "We'll get our normal table," he said. "Yes." As Tony stood there assisting the blonde nun in getting up off the ground, Revi walked up to the bar and called back, "You got it, Dutch." Tony pulled Ida to her feet and said, "It's nice to meet you, Ida." "My name is Tony." "His name is Revi," he informed her. Ida bit the back of her lip and said, "Yeah. Nice to meet you, Tony." She couldn't tell when this had happened. Ask herself, how long have these two been together? Hell, even the background check I did for the CIA or the rip-off church didn't turn up anything about her being married to this man. But also there was only a paper trail for her up until she was 14. Tony laughed and said, my wife is always full of surprises. He could tell she was thinking about something, and he knew that the rip-off church did background checks on everyone they did business with because they didn't want to get into any trouble. They also used the church as a cover for their drug and alcohol smuggling and gun running because no one would ever consider looking at a church for dirty dealing. A man with long black hair entered the bar and said, hey Revy. When will you give me a good time? The jerk who had just entered said. With the beer bottles in her hands, Revy turned around and hissed, like I'll waste my time on you. Her dark brown eyes hardened and became icy. The man pulled his pants up and thrust his hips in her direction, laughing and saying, ah, you know you want this. As Tony now stands beside her with his arm wrapped around her waist, Revy laughs and says, why would I waste myself time with an asshole who has a tiny dick that I need a microscope to see it when I have a real man right next to me? As Tony smirked at him, the man glared at him. I wouldn't allow her to sink so low with a thing like you, he said to the man, who was still grinning. The man growled, bastard. Hi, boss, give it up. One of his flunky to his right said, we have other business to be here. Stop talking. The idiot drew a gun and growled, I have new business to handle right now. If it's a gunfight you want, Revy said, turning back to the jerk after carrying the beers to the table. As her hands moved to her guns, she told him, then you're going to have your fight with me. Her dark brown eyes flashed crimson. Revy, this isn't between us. With his brown eyes fixed on Tony, the idiot said, this is between that bastard and me. Tony puts his hand on Revy's shoulder and laughs, saying, don't worry about it, hun. I understand. At his sides, a pair of cutlasses emerge. When they appeared, no one paid attention to the small can of smoke. Because his guns are identical to hers, Revy smirks as she looks down at them. She kissed him on the cheek and said, okay. I'll finally get to see if you're as good as me. Tony glanced over his shoulder at the bartender and said, why don't we take this outside? As I don't think the bartender wants us to shoot up his place. He snarled at the bartender, damn right. You two fuckers take it outside to two bastards. As the bastard glared at them both, Tony nodded his head and Revy followed him to the door. With the intention of shooting Tony in the back so he could witness Revy's tears before taking her and fucking her like the whore she is, he trailed behind the two lovers and pulled out his gun. However, Tony shot the bastard in the left arm and right leg as he fell to the ground, rolling around in agony, after spinning around with his twin cutlasses out and shooting the gun out of his hand. Bastard! He screams as he reaches for the gun with his right hand, but Tony stomps on the bastard's right hand, walks up to him, and shoots the gun away. Before the idiot looked up into his eyes, he used a genjutsu that caused his own eyes to flash crimson. If was you, I would think twice before insulting my wife. As Tony broke his hand beneath his heavy combat boot, he yelled, yeah you got it mana. I'll leave the bitch alone ya. He narrows his eyes and knocks the bastard unconscious by kicking him in the face. As he turned and passed the two flunkies, Tony growled, don't call her that bastard. He put his arm around Revy's shoulder and said, you might want to get your boss to a hospital. They entered the bar and sat down at the table where Ida and the other person were now seated, with a bottle of vodka on the table. Watching Revy and the others from Black Lagoon, the shadow maid squinted her eyes. As she slowly pushed her chair back, she thought, it seems like these people might have the answers to the questions I need. Revy watched as the woman seated at the doorway table slowly rose to her feet. We seem to have caught her attention. The bloodlust in them is insane, she thought to herself as her gaze shifted to Tony, who gave her a slight nod before turning to face Dutch, who was also not missing the woman. At the moment, Benny was too preoccupied with Ida's laughter to notice the woman approaching them. With her eyes fixed on her beer bottle while she took a sip, Revy asks, so what can I do for you? The woman with a strong Latin accent said, I have come seeking out a company called Black Lagoon. I have been told they are the best to hire when tracking someone down. Dutch gave the woman a look. He informed her that, we are on vacation right now. The woman's icy brown eyes grew icier. She yelled at the big man seated in front of her, I don't care. I need a job done and I can't wait for you to finish your little holiday. Tony raised an eyebrow at the seasoned woman in front of them. He wanted to know directly what kind of work his wife did on a daily basis, so he asked, what type of job? The woman turned to face him. She said to the man with the raven hair in front of her, "My master's father was murdered, and he was kidnapped, and I was powerless to stop them. I need your help to save him." Revi laughed. She looked at her boss and remarked, "It would be fun to have Tony on a little mission. This wouldn't be anything different from his everyday life." Looking at the two lovers, Rock asked, "Are you sure about this?" Tony dismissed him with a wave. "This is what I do daily. My boss has me doing stuff like this normally and other things daily." He exhaled. "But I guess it would be fun to see how you guys handle things from how we do things." He replied. The maid gave them a crazy look. She told them, "You people are insane." With a shit-eating grin, Revi said, "That is what you are paying for, lady." Tony asked, glancing at the maid in front of them, "So what are the details of this mission?" After setting the suitcase on the table, the maid opened it and took out pictures and packets of her master and the man who had taken the boy. "This is my master Garcia. He is now the lord of our land and master of the family. For his father was Don of Mafia," she went on. At this, Tony raised an eyebrow. "So this little boy is now the leader of a Yakuza family." His gaze shifted to the maid in front of them as she described the men who had taken the boy and who they were. He sighed and said, "She is the dog that his father had hired to watch over the boy and would kill anyone who tried to hurt him." Revi simply listened to Kurama's words. "She seems to be afraid for the kid." He told her that he was also ashamed of himself for not taking better care of the kid's father. "Yes, it seems like it," Revi remarked. "Fine, we'll set out in the morning to hunt them down and take them out," Dutch replied. Revi got up and got a few more beers while she froze in her tracks, and everyone nodded as they finished their drinks. Revi yelled, "Get down!" as gunfire erupted. As those who managed to get out of the way returned fire, everyone leapt out of the way and ducked in, shielded from the gunfire. Tony drew his weapons, got to his feet, and started shooting back while keeping an eye out for Revi. Where is she? His mind was buzzing with ideas and concern for his troublesome bride, so he asked himself. Revi leapt from the bar behind which she had hidden and hurried to Tony. Her tone was playful as she asked him, "Miss me lover?" Tony gave her a sly smile. As they are now firing rounds at the idiots who had the audacity to attack them, he told her, "Always." One of the idiots Roberta had previously beaten up yelled, "Come on, 2 hands. Our beef isn't with you. It's with the bitch maid inside. Send her out and we'll part ways." She jumped up to the ceiling rafters and then followed Tony to the windows overlooking the now blown away front door. "How about you go and fuck yourself, Carlos? You come here while we're here relaxing and knocking back a few brews and you fucking open fire on us. Now you're going to fucking pay, you bastard," she screamed. Tony winked at his lethal wife and asked, "You ready, babe?" Revi blew him a kiss and said, "Always, lover." Both of them leapt through the window, shooting Carlos and his men as they fell like flies. 3 were shot in the head after they had enraged Revi by repeatedly attempting to grab her, while the others were shot in the hand or arm. Tony puts a smoking gun to Carlos's temple and asks, "What do you have with my troublesome wife?" The man pissed his white pants and went pale. Now he was crapping his pants and said, "No, nothing, man. I didn't know the bitch was yours. I just wanted the bitch maid." Tony's nose wrinkled. He growled, his eyes flashing crimson as he looked down at himself under the full moon, the outline of a demon looming over him. "Not the maid, Revi. What do you want with her?" he asked. "I don't want nothing to do with her. She is too fucking crazy for me and my men," he was screaming. Tony kicked the bastard in the face and said, "Then get the fuck out of here." Carlos' head snapped back and he passed out as the idiots who were still able to move dragged him into the car and drove away. One of the piss ants exclaimed, "This isn't the end of this, Revi." Revi exclaims, "Yeah, and I'll shot that tiny little dick off next time." With a sinister grin. Before them, Benny arrives with the car and all of its occupants. "Get in," Dutch yelled. The two nodded, jumped into the back seat, and turned to face the 3 people seated behind them. Tony has Revi perched on his lap. Revi grinned as he said, "So that was fun." Tony lets out a sigh. He rests his forehead on her back and asks, "So is that a normal Friday night for you?" Revi smiled and glanced at the 2 women seated next to her, saying, "Pretty much." Tony sighed again at his wife's antics and muttered to himself, "I swear I should have never let you come here without me. But I think it was for the best." Revi turned to face Tony and said, "I have been fine, and Dutch has done his best training me as well as Benny. So don't worry so much." She smiled and said to him, Ida laughed and said, poor bastard. If only he knew half the shit she has done. He would have died of a heart attack. Tony turned to face her. Oh, trust me, I know she can be a handful. She had the entire police force from where we are from hunting after her after some shit she pulled. No one could catch her. He was chuckling at the thought. Yeah, that was fun. No one could ever find me until I got bored allowed out teacher to catch me. Revi replied with a smirk. As though they had grown a second head, they simply gazed at the two. Roberta asked, what the hell are you two? Tony laughed and said, a mystery. Roberta looked at the two oddballs from Black Lagoon and said, whatever. Just do the job I want done. Done, and I don't care how you do it. Tower of Hokage. A man with a crimson head asked the Hokage, so are you going to be calling her back soon? She said to the man seated across from her, for the time being, it is best that she stays away. He sighed and said, I know. But, they are hunting for the ones like myself and her, and I need to get away from here, and I want to know if she would allow me to hide out there. He stated to the Hokage. I do not know. I would have to ask my friend, as her husband is there at the moment, and knowing those two. They are now neck deep in trouble. But give me a day and I will let you know. He replied. He gave a nod and got to his feet. He informed her, I will come back in the morning for your response. She gave a head nod. With a sigh, Tsunade closed her eyes and took out a cell phone that, amazingly, was functional in the EN. However, this phone had a small secret. As she tapped the image of a purple-haired woman with two guns and an evil grin on her face on the screen, a seal on the back of it started to glow. It rang a few times before a muffled, giggling voice could be heard. Hello. Hearing that her adopted daughter was enjoying herself on the other end, Tsunade grinned and said, brat. Hey Ba-chan, what's up? Revi asked, knowing that Tsunade wouldn't address her by name because there were still too many people in that office. Before Tsunade could find her voice, there was a brief period of silence. She frowned and said, I have a request from you, brat. On the other end of the line, Revi frowned and said, well, okay. Your timing on calling isn't the best, but it is what it is. In a panic over the girl's safety, Tsunade demanded, what? What's happening? Are you okay? Do you need medical help? A chuckle escaped. She gasped and giggled again, then said, no. It's fine. It's just we are running from a firefight and are heading back to the office and taking on a mission. So what do you need, Granny? She giggled again and said, stop that. Then Tsunade sighed. She said to the perplexed, listen to me now, okay? I have someone who wants to join you for protection. Revi laughed even harder at what was happening to her, and she asked, sure. Do you need me to send a wolf to pick them up? Yeah, send them and I'll have some scrolls for you, and I'll go get them to let them know you are sending for them to join you now. Tsunade replied with a grin. As the line died, Revi gasped again and said, okay. I got to go. For someone doesn't know how to keep his hands to himself. With a sigh, Tsunade switched off her cell phone and put it back in the seal that only she could access. She pushed back in her chair, got to her feet, and turned to face the village window with a frown on her face. She turned around and walked out of her office, whispering, they are both good for this village. She saw the person she wanted to talk to as she was walking down the hallway. He was standing there talking to multiple people. As they gazed down at him with concern and joy, she assumed the others were his siblings and the two she knew from Team 10. Tsunade approached the young man and called out, Gaara. Gaara pivoted to face the curvaceous blonde standing behind him. In a quiet voice, he said, Lady Tsunade. Tsunade asks, grinning, she has agreed for you to join her. But you will be leaving in the next few minutes. Do you have everything you need with you? As everyone stared at the two, Gaara said, I do. Who are you sending Gaara-kun to? Ino asked, gazing up at the fifth Hokage. Tsunade looked at the blonde in front of her and said, I can't say for now. But he will be safe. No one knows where she is. Choji winked at the fifth Hokage and narrowed her eyes, saying, well, tell the two when you see them. Hi for me, you'll know who I'm talking about when you see them. She grinned back at the big boy, thinking to herself, Brad knows more than he lets on. The blonde girl next to Gaara asks, would it be okay if we join our brother? Then Tsunade sighed. She looked up at the two siblings and said, no, because I am already asking too much of a friend and the girl. The boy wearing the cat ear bodysuit said, we understand. Tsunade turned on her heel and made her way back to her office, saying, come Gaara, we must return to my office. For the way you are heading towards her should be waiting there. Gaara turned to face his two siblings after giving them a nod. He nods his head in the direction of the Team 10 members and says, I am leaving the village in your hands. Take care of it in my place. When Tsunade opens her door, he follows her and notices a medium-sized, two-tailed wolf seated beside her desk. Nyx turned to face her and said, I'm here for the cub as well, do you have my payment? As Tsunade pushed a bookcase back, a large scroll appeared. She picked it up and walked to her desk, the bookcase closing behind her. Yes, Nyx, thank you for coming for the young man and the scrolls one have for her. She pulled out a bag of deer jerky from a drawer as she sat behind her desk. She said to him, here you go. Nyx took the chips, put them in his vest, and put the scroll in his mouth while Gaara climbed onto his back and clung to it. Thanks. Now boy, come and sit on my back as we get ready to leave and make sure you hold on. Nyx said. They then disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Returning to the group of outcasts. A few minutes ago. Revi reaches into her shorts and retrieves a ringing phone. As she answered the phone, she burst out laughing and said, Tony knocked it off. I need to get this. Hello. Tsunade said, brat. Revi smiled as she glanced down at her phone, which had a speaker. Tony kisses Revi's neck and draws her in closer. With a smile on her face and a look of pure excitement in her eyes, Revi pushed Tony away from her for a few seconds and asked, Hey Ba-chan. What's up? Revi scowled at Tsunade's silence before she continued. Until Tsunade's voice reached the other end of the line. She said, I have a request from you brat. Revi frowned now, wondering why Tsunade was calling her at this particular moment. She continued to frown as she said, well alright. Your timing on calling isn't the best but it is what it is. The panic in Tsunade's voice was audible to her. With panic in her voice, she demanded, What? What happened? Are you okay? Do you need medical help? To soothe her, Tony repeatedly tickled her and bit her neck. With a giggle, Revi pushed him away from her. No, it's fine. It's just we are just running from a firefight and heading back to the office to take on a mission. So what do you need, Granny? She exclaimed with a gasp. She growled at him while simultaneously letting out a giggle. Damn it Tony, stop it. She heard Tsunade sigh. Revi raised an eyebrow at Tony, who simply shrugged his shoulders since he had no clue what the woman was thinking. Well, listen to me now, okay. I have someone that is wishing to join you for protection. Revi laughed as Dutch reached over from the front seat to give Tony a head smack. Sure, do you need me to send a wolf to pick them up? She asked. Deadpan Dutch, observing the young man desperately clinging to Revi, said, settle down. Revi couldn't contain her laughter at what she was seeing. Yeah, send them and I'll have some scrolls for you, and I'll go get them to let them know you are sending for them to join you now. Tsunade replied with a grin. Hearing this, Revi smiled. She would need to give Nyx a treat when he returned from his brief mission if she continued to train him. As the line died, Revi gasped again and said, okay. I got to go. For someone doesn't know how to keep his hands to himself. Now. Revi slapped him on the shoulder and said, you really need to stop doing that when I'm on the phone. Tony teased, yeah, sorry, I wanted to see if you can keep focus on what you're doing. The car came to a stop in front of their house, and Revi rolled her eyes. As he exited the vehicle and ascended the building's stairs, Dutch said, come on children. Let's get ready for our new guest and get more details on his new mission. Benny just laughs to himself at Revi and Tony's antics while everyone in the back seat blinks at the young married couple multiple times before falling out of the car themselves. He sighed and said, it's never boring here with Revi now with Tanya. Revi jumped out of the car, bit her thumb, and hurried through a few hand signals before slamming her hand to the floor. Summoning jutsu. Nyx, she exclaimed, surrounded by a red glow while everyone else, with the exception of Tony and Benny, looked on in wonder. A small midnight black wolf materialized in a purple puff of smoke. Hey, what's up Revi? Asks Nyx, grinning broadly. Revi smiled and said, I need you to see Ba-chan and bring back a friend for safekeeping until it's safe to return him. Alright, but you know it will cost you. Nyx replied. With a big smile, Revi waved him away and said, I know. I have a box of deer jerky in my room you can have. Nyx said, alright, see you in a few. He was leaving. Revi turned and walked slowly up the stairs, while Tony ran after her and the others just stared at her. Come on, let's head inside and I'm heading to the roof to wait for his return. With a terrified tone, Rock asks, did we just see a talking wolf? Benny smiled and said, yup. You're calm about seeing this. The maid said, examining the man with the blonde hair as they all turned to face him. Benny grinned and said, I've seen a lot being around Revy and a few interesting people. He said, it's never boring with her around. He left the three standing there, trying to process what had just transpired. Benny was waiting for her at the open office door, where Dutch was seen opening a bottle of Jack Daniels in his hand while holding multiple glasses on his desk. Roberta quickly followed him after shaking herself out of the shock. Up on the roof, Revy was kissed by Tony while pressed against the wall. While he caught his breath, he whispered into her ear, I've missed you. I don't care how many times I'll tell you this. Revy rested her forehead on his shoulder and said, I've missed you too. As he emerged in a cloud of purple smoke, Nyx called out, we're here. Revy said, welcome back, Nyx, without moving, but Tony tensed up when he noticed who was standing beside the medium-sized wolf. Tony was stunned by what he was seeing and asked, Gara, what are you doing here? The office of Dutch. As the maid across from her held her glass in her hand, Rock was writing down everything and working out the contract while Benny sat next to Dutch's desk and drank his whiskey. We'll take the job like we said in the bar. But we need to work out payment and who has the boy. Revy is back. Then Revy exclaimed, what? Dutch and company are back. Revy's yell caused Dutch and Benny to drop their glasses and bolt from their seats for the stairs. Since no one had ever witnessed the two men acting this way toward Revy, the others stared at Rock in bewilderment. Yes, they did occasionally witness them acting protectively toward the woman. But when she screamed like that, I've never seen them flee. Rock simply shrugged his shoulders, dropped his clipboard and pen, and chased after the two men to find out what in the world was going on. Revy is back. Revy demanded, what do you mean they are killing the host? As she stood in front of the redhead, who was staring up at her with his icy yet broken teal eyes. Like I said, the group has been moving around as of late looking for all the hosts of the tail beast. I went to Lady Tsunade to see if there was something or someone that could help me. For rumors are they are going to my village of the hidden sand to come and take me to kill me and take Shukaku. Gara was looking away. With me gone, I don't know what the hell those bastards are thinking. They need the 9 tails to finish their goal. Unless Revy turned to Tony. Revy asks, they all believe that the demon of Konoha is dead. Tony sighed and turned to face her. Yes, we worked hard to tell them that the last Uzumaki, the host of the 9 tails, was killed the night you vanished on Lady Tsunade's request. He replied. Gazing at the Nara air, Gara asks, Shikamaru, what are you doing here? Tony turned to face the woman with the purple hair and said, here it is Tony. We have to change our names. For me being here, I am here to visit my beloved wife that I haven't seen in an exceedingly long time. As well I am on vacation. I have been working my ass off for these past few years as well as telling your sister I am a married man. He said as he looked at the cage who was. Gara's gaze expanded. He trailed off, knowing better than to say the girl's name aloud. Then this is. Revy said, smiling at him, yup. She looked up at the slammed door and said, but if you are going to be living here, you're going to have to hide your tattoo and change your name for the time being. A concerned Dutch and Benny stood in front of her, both of them breathing heavily now as they gazed at the odd young man with the red hair and the forehead tattoo in front of Revy. Gara, Tony, and Revy blink as they observe everyone gathered in the open doorway. With bewilderment on her face, Revy asks her boss, Dutch. What's wrong? With a frown on his face, Dutch demands, why did you scream? As she stomps toward the perplexed, Revy gives him a smile. She rubbed her right hand behind her head and said, well, you see. She was wearing one of her devilish, sheepish smiles. As her gaze moves to Gara, she tells him, my past has come knocking. Dutch and Benny turn to face the boy with auburn hair who is standing to Tony's right. Benny asks, frowning, so, that's the kid from your past. Gara steps forward, his teal eyes never leaving the two men in front of him and Revy. He catches Tony slouching against the small wall on the roof out of the corner of his right eye. He pauses to clear his throat before continuing, I am sure you have been told Buddha. As Benny's eyes enlarge in horror and Dutch's brow rises higher above his sunglasses, he informs them of the Revy special circumstances that surround myself as well as her own life. Dutch frowns and asks, so, you are telling me that my little friend over in the EN has sent me another one? Yup. Revy grins wickedly as she bursts into laughter. She looks at the newcomers now standing in the doorway and says to him, anyway with him here. We will have an extra hand with finding that damn kid. Rock steps away from the other people standing with him and says, Revy. Tony's eyes are slightly irritated as he looks at Rock. He tells Rock, who recoils a little and steps back, do not worry about what is happening at the moment. All will be explained to you soon. Rock returns to the others, swallowing the thickness in his throat. Dutch keeps an eye on Tony. He looks back at the perplexed and says to Revy, if your past is coming to haunt you now. I do believe we will have to be having a staff meeting soon. Revy responds to him, that's fine. Nyx turns to face her. With a hint of irritation in his voice, he asks her, are you going to pay me now or what? She turns to face him and rolls her eyes. She gives him a playful huff and says, yes, Nyx. Come on, let's go down to my room. Gara turns to face Tony. He turns to face Dutch and Benny and asks, so, how am I going to blend in with the people here? Come on, I have an outfit that should fit you until we are able to head to the shops in the morning. As well as some hair dye Revy had bought me. Tony says to the cage. Gara follows the Nara heir, nodding his head. His eyes were filled with tears as he observed everyone on the roof. Ida glances at Benny and Dutch. She asks them, what the fuck just happened? Dutch gives a headshake. He turns on his heel and follows the four who have already left the roof, telling her, it isn't my story to tell. The room of Revy. Revy unlocks her bedroom door. Nyx shoves by her. She rolls her eyes and tells Nyx, geez, someone is being impatient. Nyx looks at her with his violet eyes. He tells her in a frustrated tone, I have things to do. As well this dear jerky will be going to my mother. Revy responds, oh, and walks to a trunk in her room. She pulls out a bag of jerky and a large bag of deer jerky, flipping the lid over. She smiles as she tells him, here, give this to your mom. She smirks at her as he wraps his tails around the two bags. As he ascends in a cloud of purple smoke, Nyx says to her, thanks. I'll let her know that you have sent this specially for her. Tony and Gara enter her bedroom as the smoke subsides. Tony smirks at her and asks, all right, Revy, do you still have the hair dye you bought me? Revy turns to look at him. She tells them, well I do. I have blonde, pink, blue, brown, and black. Tony raises an eyebrow at the hues she just mentioned. Gara's right hand slides beneath his chin. He looks down at her and says, well, maybe the blue. Revy smirks as she tells Gara, we can do that. I'll just have to bleach your hair. She looks up at him with a slightly perplexed expression on her face and says, as well, we need to come up with a new name for you as well. Gara looks at the two people in the room with him as he continues to think. He tells them in an honest tone, I wouldn't mind the name Nyx. For I did like the sound of it. Revy offers him a sly smile and says, that works. Tony merely gives a headshake. He complains, troublesome. He pulls out the outfit he had mentioned to the now named Nyx as he passes Gara and Revy and heads for the dresser. He wore a pair of black cargo pants, a black short-sleeve shirt with a neon blue long sleeve underneath, and an additional pair of boots with seals to adjust the size because he wasn't sure if they would fit the man who was following Revy out of the bedroom. Everything is placed on the bed. He goes after them. He follows them into the kitchen while she has Nyx with a white wife beater and a bundle of towels in his arms. She has the blue dye and bleach with her. All right Nyx, I need you to remove your top and put on that white wife beater. For the bleach will destroy your top. She informs him. As she arranges everything on the table, he nods his head slowly. His hands reach up to his top's buttons. He swiftly took it off along with his mesh armor, folded them, set them on the table, then picked up the white tank and put it over his head. Benny enters the kitchen by chance. His eyes glaze over the scene in front of him as he stops at the doorway. He asks her, Revy, what are you doing? Tony sits on the counter, watching her mix while holding the blue dye, while Revy looks up from mixing the bleach and Gara sits down on one of the old chairs. Revy smiles as she tells him, oh, I am going to bleach and dye Nyx's hair. Benny looks at Nyx and asks, oh so that's the name you have chosen. Nyx says in a flat voice, yes, I like the sound of it. Benny smiles and says, well that works. We are an interesting group. I do hope you enjoy your time with us. He then heads to the refrigerator for another beer. Gara simply observed his movements. He says to the other man, I am curious about this new life I am walking into. At what he just heard, Tony snorts. Nyx, you are going to just do what you did in your past life. Just without jutsus or your sand. You will have to learn how to use a gun. Knives are fine, he stated to the soon-to-be brunette. Nix's shocked teal eyes widened. What? He asks, emphasizing it with a hint of demand. Tony smirks and says, people like us do not exist in this world. It isn't like the EN. They settle fights with their fist or with a gun or knife. According to Revy, also my favorite rocket launchers. Benny leans against the table and looks down at the new crew member, telling him, don't worry Nix. Once you are finished here, I can show you what our style of warfare is like. Benny quickly corrects himself from saying, we, and Nix tells him, that sounds fine. It appears I have a lot to learn about if I am going to be living here until it is time to return back to my past life. After setting the bowl on the table, Revy approaches Nix, puts on black gloves, and wraps a towel around her shoulders, making sure to clip it to prevent it from falling. As Tony leaps off the counter and proceeds to open the back door and windows, she complains, okay, calm down, Nix. I have to finish this. This shit is going to smell. A few hours later, Nix is wearing his new outfit and has blue hair. The office of Dutch. Roberta crosses her arms over her chest and sits in front of Dutch. She asks the man seated in front of her, when are we going to be leaving to find Garcia? He looks at the woman sitting in front of him while lowering his sunglasses and slightly dutching the bridge of his nose. He gives her a chilly glare and says, well Roberta, I have to wait for the information I need. Without that information, we will be going in blind as well. His voice is irritated. Tony and Nix follow Revy as he enters the office. She asks, well Dutch, do we know where we are heading to yet? He frowns as he glances in her direction. He snarls at her, no. Revy gives him a snort. With a shit-eating smile, she tells him, geez, Dutch. Take a chill pill. Dutch snarls at her, saying, Revy get the fuck out of my office until I need your fucking ass. Revy puts her arms around Tony and Nix and asks, alright. Who's up for a trip to the bar? Dutch snarls at her, don't you dear. Revy looks at him over her right shoulder and freezes in place. What? She asks her supervisor. Dutch growls as he tells her, I need you to play your best game, Revy. I don't need you to shitface. Revy hisses at him, fine. She flips him off and says, we'll just head to the kitchen and have a couple of beers, departing with her brother and husband. Ida snorted and pushed herself off the couch to join the perplet, saying, well it appears Revy is in a mood. Dutch asks her, why are you still here Ida? After pondering that question for some time. The blonde is grinning as she turns to face him. She smirks and turns back to wave over her right shoulder, telling him, well, it's my night off from the church and it's never boring when it comes to hanging around with Revy. While he waits for Chong to call, Dutch simply sighs. He complains to his 3 teenagers, I am getting too old for his bullshit. Dutch is currently lamenting life when there is a knock on the office door. As the office door opens, all eyes turn to the man with the black hair and sunglasses who is standing there grinning and staring at them. He smiles as he says, why hello everyone. Revy grinned and said, Chong. It's about fucking time you have shown up. I thought I was going to become an old lady waiting for your ass to show. She is angry with him in her words. Chong laughed and said, pardon me, Revy. I have an underworld and police station to manage. But young lady, who are those 2 boys standing with you? As I don't believe I have ever seen them around before. He asks, grinning. Nix and Tony exchange glances. Tony moves to the front. With a sly smile on her face, he said, I am Tony. I am Revy's husband. Nix takes Revy's place. Without providing a last name, he stated, I am her younger brother. My name is Nix. Following Tony's example. When Chong hears what the 2 young men in front of him have to say, his eyebrows shoot upward. He turned his head to look at Revy. He tells her, I hadn't known you're married 2 hands. With her hands raised in the air, Revy dismisses the man. She puts her hands back on his hips and tells him, there is a lot you don't know about me. She narrows her eyes at the cricket police officer and asks, are you going to tell us who has the brat? Chong starts to explain to them, well, Abrigo belongs to the Manizarera cartel, one of the Colombian cartels in our lovely backyard. Revy rolls her eyes and sighs. She snarls in frustration, fed up with Abrigo's nonsense. I have already had a run with Abrigo, and I have already fucking told him the next time he pisses me off, I am going to be putting him in a shallow grave. Tony looks at Chong and Roberta and asks, so, I take it that the Manizarera cartel want to make a move and run the Lovelace Mafia out of business any means possible. Roberta looks down. Yes, they do, as they have already killed Garcia's father, Senior Diego. His final wishes were for me to find his son and make sure Garcia can take the seat of power and keep the Lovelace family in power within the Colombian cartels and mafias. She replies with a sorrowful scowl. Chong turns to face Dutch and Revy. As he rises from his chair, he tells them, all I want is for this mess to go away, and if you can make Abrigo vanish in the process, heading for the door that is now open. He pauses and turns to face them again. His last caution to them is, just don't blow my city up. Stay out of the way. Snares one of the thugs Abrigo had assigned to keep an eye on the boy, saying, so, this is the brat that is now the 12th head of the Lovelace family. Another man sitting in front of a card table, playing cards with 3 other men, says, Carlos leaves the boy alone. You know, if anything happens to him, Abrigo will be terribly upset, as he is the boss's bargaining chip. As the other 3 men laughed, Carlos said to the other, can it, Francisco? I'm not going to hurt the fucking brat. I am just shocked that a little spineless punk like him is now the new leader of the Lovelace family. Garcia is openly glaring at the other men and yells, you're not going to get away with this. My father will be coming for me. With a cruel snare on his face, Carlos starts to tell Garcia, sure brat. But there is one problem with that statement. Seeing the boy's face, he starts to laugh sarcastically at the boy in front of him and informs him, your father is dead. Office in Black Lagoon. Dutch looks at these 2 new members and sighs, despite the fact that one is only present temporarily. He informs everyone, so, we need to find where they are holding the kid. Rock asks as he gets up from the couch, so, are we going to ask for Balalaika for any help? Revy tells him, grinning at her 2 new partners, no way. I think Tony, Nix and I can manage this. Rock tries to stop his friend from leaving on her own, saying, but Revy, we need all the help we can get. Tony snarls at the frail little Japanese man, she isn't a weak little teenage girl. So do not underestimate her. Even Nix was glaring at the man. As the other 2 follow suit, Nix pushes past Rock and heads up to Revy's room to prepare for the mission, saying, we are the best to finding any person or information without the aid of anyone else. Everyone looks a little perplexed. Rock asks bewilderedly, was it something I said? As he gets up to go to his computer room, Benny sighs and turns to face the ignorant man, saying, if only you truly knew, to begin working on any information that Revy will be providing them. Revy kicks open the door to her bedroom with a growl. She rushes into her bedroom. She was prepared to go back downstairs and vent to Rock. As she collapses on her bed beside the clothes that have been laid out for Nix, she growls, that little fuck. I thought we had gotten past this part already. Hey Nix, take your clothes into the bathroom there to change, and if you wish would take a shower. It's up to you, man. Tony says to the brunette. Nix walked dryly into the bathroom to take a shower and said, okay. She is asked by Tony, Revy, are you okay? Revy slowly shifts her gaze to her husband and true love. She sobs, no, I'm not all right. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of not being able to have you in my bed every night. But, no, I can't have what I want. I can't live a normal life. She is fed up with having jerks pursue her because of the person who was sealed inside her. She sighs out loud. Revy says to Tony, I'm sorry, being fully aware that he feels the same way she does. With his right hand cupping her left cheek, Shika says, my dear Narua, one day I shall give you the life you wish for. She was nestled in his hand. With a dazzling smile, Naru tells him, I know. I love you. I know I shouldn't, but I want to end it here, for the tender moment they just shared. In Dutch's office, down. Once 2 hands and her crew come downstairs. We will go over the plan to save Garcia. Dutch says to Roberta. Roberta glares at the closed door and says, okay. As long as we save Garcia, I have no issues with you nor anyone else upon this island. 3 people are waiting. In Revy's room upstairs, Nix emerges from the restroom completely clothed. Revy reaches into her dresser and takes out a number of scrolls. She smiles at the 2 men and says, here we need to gear you 2 up. Nix looks at the scroll and asks, what do you have? As Revy starts unsealing guns and various knives for fighting and throwing. Nix pointed to some knives with spiral blades and said, could I have those knives? As she gave him those blades, along with some throwing blades and larger knives to use in combat, Revy said, yeah sure. Those ones are best for kill blows, as once they remove it, they bleed out to death. Revy cautions him, remember we do not use chakra here, so no sand. Being fully aware of this would lead to more issues than anything else. Nix gives a nod. Any issues would arise from Shikuku alone. Tony reaches down and picks up a variety of guns and blades. As he prepared for this mission, he put the guns in the harness he had put on. I just hate that I'm being pulled from my vacation to do a mission. Revi says. You hear Revi stomping down the stairs in his combat boots. She enters Dutch's office. She glares at everyone in the office and hisses, let's get this shit over with. As I want to return to my vacation as soon as possible. You hear Revi stomping down the stairs in his combat boots. She enters Dutch's office. She glares at everyone in the office and hisses, let's get this shit over with. As I want to return to my vacation as soon as possible. Dutch waved his right hand dismissively and said, yeah. You'll get some extra vacation days after this. Tony looks at Dutch and asks, so, where are we heading to? He wants this to be done as quickly as possible. Ida adds something. As things start to get interesting, she tells Dutch, I'm free and this will give me something to do. So, I'll help out. Dutch turns to face Ida. He asks her, are you sure about that? The Ripoff Church will be missing you. Ida waved the man away and said, nah, I'm on Mother Superior's nervous at the moment. She had to spend a few days away after making a mistake on a shipment. Revi's eyes gleamed crimson as Dutch said, Francisco, is the little punk we are going after 2 hands? With a sickly cold tone, Revi said, good. I have to pay him back for last time. She rubbed her right side cutlass with her fingers. With a devilish laugh, she continued, Carlos also has a pound of flash he owes me. So this is going to be fun. Everyone in the office who didn't know her well felt uneasy as a result. A hiding place. Francisco throws an empty beer can across the room and demands, Carlos, where is that bitch with the money? Carlos laughed and remarked, I don't know. It's not like we are going to give the fucking brat back to the bitch. Francisco backhanded Goritza across the face and remarked, she doesn't know that. Only this brat. Just the force of the blow sent the boy strapped to the chair flying across the room. Beyond the hideout, Francisco, exclaims Roberta. Francisco smirked and went to pick up the brat, saying, looks like she is finally here, removing him from the chair's bindings. The boy ignored the blood that was trickling down the corner of his mouth. Francisco flings Goritza to the ground in front of him and yells, about damn time. Where is the money? Revi raised her gun and said, right here. Francisco yells, what the fuck are you doing here, Revi? I got no beef with you. As panic and terror consume his face. With her cutlass in her right hand, Revi tells him, oh you know. I had to come pay a ransom to 2 little bitches. Something the man had failed to notice. Revi fired her cutlass between Francisco's eyes and said, here. Since they hadn't brought any additional men, Carlos collapsed to the ground, urinating in his pants. He stumbled to his feet, picked up the child, and cut him free, saying, Revi, I hadn't had anything to do with this. I was just going along for the ride. He turned to flee, saying, come on kid. Go to the nice girl with the gun. Revi shoots him in the back with her other cutlass. With a deadly, icy tone, she said, Carlos, this is goodbye. Roberta yells, Garcia, as she dashes to her youthful master. Roberta, Garcia exclaims as he collapses into the woman's arms. Snot was streaming from his nose, and tears were streaming down his cheeks. With a deadpan tone, Nix remarked, how touching. Laughing, Tony and Revi exchanged glances. Ida examines them. She sighed and leaned against the car, telling Dutch, I was expecting more action. More men to be here. Not just those 2 dumbasses. Revi took care of the job herself and those 2 fools made it easy for us. Now we just have to worry about the others coming for us over these 2. Dutch replies with a scowl. As she made her way back to the car, Revi remarked, I don't think we have to worry about that. Ida asks the perplexed, why is that? Because rumor has it Francisco had a little falling out with the mob. He was trying to strike out on his own and thought taking the heir of the Loveless family would help him. Look what it got him. Revi replied with a snort. Tony approaches his sweetheart from behind and puts his arms around her waist. As Benny puts a hand on Nix's shoulder, he looks at everyone and asks, now that this bullshit is over with, can I have my wife back? Benny laughed and said, come on, Nix. I'll teach you how to use a computer and we can have some tacos. Nix was looking at him bewildered. Nix looks at the man with the blonde hair and asks, what are tacos? Benny laughed more and said, let me teach you our ways, Nix. Nix says, okay. A few days later, as Roberta pays the company fee for the rescue of the head of the Loveless family, Garcia says to Dutch, thank you for saving me. As he accepts the money, Dutch tells the two in front of him, it was a pleasure doing business with you. Call upon again if you ever need our servers again. Garcia smiled and said, I hope this will be our last meeting. He grinned again and said, but unless something comes up, this will be our last meeting. Dutch waved his hand and said, that's fine. The room of Revi. Tony lies on top of Revi as she lies in bed. Snoring softly, Revi fiddles with his hair. I wish my husband and I could go back home. With a single tear streaming down her cheek, she thought to herself, be a true family and not just have these stolen moments. Revi combed Tony's hair with her fingers. He rested his head on her chest while he slept. I want to go back home. One tear trickled down Revi's cheek as she thought to herself, I want to start a family. With a melancholy smile, Kurama said to her, I know Kit. I want to go back home as well. I want to see my siblings again one day. Naruko stood in front of him in her true form, her long blonde hair in twin ponytails, and she said, yeah, I hadn't thought about you missing your siblings. I'm sorry about being selfish, Kurama. It's okay I know you didn't do it out of malicious content. As you were missing that young buck there as well as his parents, your parents for the past 8 years. Kurama says with a sad grin. She looked down at her hands and told him, you're right. I'm homesick. I just want to return home to see everyone. Even for just an hour. She knew that going home at this moment was too risky. Because they sent Gaara, of all people, to hide from the freaks who were pursuing them. As he creates a shared mindscape in which Shukaku appears, Kurama chuckles and says, at least I have one of my bratty siblings here with me. Shukaku growls, what the hell? As he surveys the mindscape. As she exits her mindscapes, she smirks and tells him, I'll leave you two to bound or you to beat the crap out of him. Playing with her blonde, purple hair, Shikamaru had just woken up, observing her expression while she converses with Kurama. He kisses the palm of her right hand after raising it. Revi looks down at Tony's onyx eyes and slowly opens her eyes. She smiles softly and says, hey, to him. He gives her a gentle smile in return and says, hey. He leans in and presses his lips to hers. How mad would Dutch be if I kidnapped you and took you home with me and hid you in my room? He inquired. She gave him a giggle. I think he would be pretty mad as he relies on me on a lot of his missions. But I can retire whenever I want, she says with a grin. He puts his arms around her belly and says, well, I'm ready for you to retire and come home with me. He frowned as he said, as I know you was tried of running and hiding from those bastards. He growled that part out against her belly, saying, I need to get stronger to take them down. She clings to him and says, I know. I want to go home. But I can't. For now I have to enjoy these stolen moments with you. With a kiss on her forehead, he informed her, I know my little kitsune. In Dutch's office, downstairs. While speaking with someone on the phone, Dutch keeps his phone close to his ear. He answers the phone and says to the woman, I know. I know it's going to be hard for her to let him go after this week he spends with her. I just worry if he will run away or she will return to the village without thinking. Tsunade tells him that she is overly concerned. Dutch, who had grown fond of Revi in his office, suggested with a laugh, then give the boy more time with her. Give him a month with her. Allow him to work alongside each other. Like they would have, if they had been together in the village. You know what, you're right, I'll call her and tell him to stay for a month. Give them some more time. Time they need, for a week isn't enough. A month they will be happy with and I'll send him every few months to see her. Tsunade replied. She sighs as she realizes that she ought to have taken action much earlier. When Rock entered Dutch's office carrying some paperwork, he said, well Lily, I'll let you take care of that. I have some paperwork to handle. Tsunade clicked and said, I understand. I'll talk to you later, Dutch. The mansion of the Hokage. As she lay in bed, Tsunade gazed up at the dawn sky. Shikaku Nara took over her responsibilities for the day since she had taken a day off. She pulls up Revi's number on her phone and glances down at it. When the phone rings, she puts it to her ear. Hello, Revi asks, sounding a little perplexed. She said to the girl, Brat. I want to talk to the other brat. As he takes the phone from her, Revi tells Tony, Ba-chan wants to talk to you. Hello, he asks, a little perplexed. I'm calling you to tell you that you are taking the month off. Not just a week. You need more time with the brat, she informed him. With a hopeful tone, he asks her, a month. Are you sure about that? Yes, 1 month, but she will only have 1 week vacation. So you will be going to work with her. So, just enjoy whatever time you have with her, he replied. As she hung up, he said, I will thank you. The bedroom of Revi. Tony hung up the phone, put it on the nightstand, and flipped Revi while towering over her. He kissed her on the lips and said, I have been here for a month now. To spend time and even work with you. She chuckles. She tells him, kissing him back, I'm glad. Tony brushed a stray lock of hair off Revi's forehead and shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He whispered, always full of sass, in a soft, loving voice. He lingered for a moment, his fingers making soft circles on her arm as his eyes searched hers for something unsaid. Warmth bloomed in Revi's chest as she shifted under his touch, but she tried to conceal it with her typical smirk. Her tone was light-hearted, but there was a tinge of something deeper, an implicit pledge that she would always be his, regardless of how far apart they would soon be. Yeah, well, someone's gotta keep you on your toes. The chaos of their world temporarily subsided as Tony leaned in and pressed his forehead against hers. Half in jest, half in concern, he muttered, don't do anything I wouldn't do, all right. Revi rolled her eyes and laughed. That doesn't leave me with much, does it, Tony? He smiled and gave her another kiss, one that contained everything they didn't have to say aloud. Just promise you'll come back to me. Always, she said, and he saw only truth in her eyes. The silence between them was a soft lull, full of the cozy quiet that lovers have when they don't need to talk. Tony sighed, the impending farewell weighing heavily on his chest. His voice was hardly audible as he leaned back and rested his head on Revi's legs. I'm not ready to leave you. The month has gone by too soon, he confessed. He reached for her left leg out of instinct, silently pleading with her to give him a little more time. He turned to face her and said, until then, I have you, his lips curving into a cunning smirk. She grabbed a pillow and gave him a light slap, causing Revi to burst out laughing. Troublesome man, she teased, her eyes soft with affection in spite of her words, as she giggled. She dropped the pillow and ran her fingers through his hair, admiring the way he gazed at her as if she were the only thing keeping him grounded. The hope that, always, could last a little while longer, the warmth between them, and the prospect of another sunrise together were all that mattered for a brief moment. In sharp contrast to the weight in Tony's chest, the soft, golden morning sun peeked through the curtains outside. He closed his eyes and allowed the sound of Revi's heartbeat to soothe him. He committed the rhythm to memory as though it would help him weather the impending storm. Tension hung as thick as the summer air in the Hokage's office, a world away, behind walls of stone and paper. Jiraiya's apprehensive laugh did not affect the legendary Sannin, and Tsunade's golden eyes narrowed. Jiraiya began by scratching the back of his neck and looking at the stoic man next to him, Hitaki Kakashi, who was always invisible behind his book. Well, you see, Hameya, he said. Tsunade's voice cracked like thunder. Don't hime me, Jiraiya, as her fist tightened dangerously on top of the papers strewn all over her desk. Tell me exactly what you found. Sweat trickled down Jiraiya's temple as he swallowed. It seems we've got trouble brewing from the shadows, Tsunade. Word is, Akatsuki's on the move again. And this time, they're targeting a. Let me guess. More of our own. Tsunade glanced at Kakashi, who nodded and closed his book with a gentle snap. Kakashi stated, it's confirmed, in a level voice. We've doubled patrols, but Anbu intercepted a coded message. They're coming for Naruto. Sharp and unavoidable, the words hung in the air like a kunai. Tsunade leaned back, breathing slowly, her thoughts already racing with backup plans. After that, we get ready. I want to brief every Jonin in an hour. To hide the concern in his eyes, Jiraiya forced a lopsided smile. You always did know how to keep us on our toes, Tsunade. And you'd better stay on yours, she retorted, slightly softening the edge in her voice. I won't lose anyone else. Not while I'm watching. Before the impending storms, there was a brief period of calm as everyone prepared for what lay ahead in their own unique ways. With a sigh heavy enough to flatten the piles of papers in front of her, Tsunade bit her thumbnail, tension etched into every line of her face. It is good Naruto and Gaara are both no longer here, she said, knowing all too well that their absence was only a thin shield, a one that could hold off danger for a while, but never forever. In her heart, she clung to the hope that perhaps, just possibly, the shadows wouldn't reach them. We'll have to send word to her. letting her know that Jiraiya said, looking away, the lines around his eyes growing deeper. His words trailed off, snagging on the weight of it. How could you put a person with the knowledge that the world wanted what they carried inside? That survival required strength, secrecy, and difficult decisions. We warn her, and we trust in her strength, he said, looking to Tsunade for assistance, but she just set her jaw and steeled her features. For the time being, that is all we can do. Could I join my student? The breeze outside the window rattled the paper doors, a silent reminder that peace was always fleeting in their world. Kakashi's gaze flickered between them, silently absorbing the gravity of the moment. He asked her to do so. Tsunade's eyes narrowed, a glimmer of surprise piercing her exhaustion, and she remained silent for a moment, examining Kakashi as though considering not just his request but also the dangers and ulterior motives woven into each word. Are you sure? You know what's waiting out there, she said, her voice softer than the steel beneath. If you leave, it may be difficult for you to return. With his silver hair gleaming in the slender sunlight, Kakashi cocked his head and said, Naruto's absence is both a target and a shield. It won't be long before someone finds her if they are pursuing what she is carrying. I owe it to her, and I can keep her safe. She'll listen to you, at least more than he ever did to me, Jiraiya said in a rougher tone than usual. It could be the decisive factor. All right, she finally admitted, but you move carefully, Kakashi. Tsunade exhaled through her nose, shoulders tense, and reached for her pen, tapping it against the edge of her desk. Strength should only be used when all other options have been exhausted. Bring her advice and her word. And if you spot the Akatsuki anywhere. Kakashi nodded, but the message was obvious even though she left it hanging. I'll leave at dawn, he announced quietly. If I'm not back in a week, assume nothing and trust no one. A lone mourning dove called somewhere far beyond the walls, its voice thin in the wind, and in the ensuing silence, resolve descended upon the room like a last, invisible armor. They were shinobi, and the only path was forward.
So this was it for the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, we weep offline.